Eleanor Hayes set the lamp down in the grass, pressed one hand flat against the orchard fence, and made herself watch. 20 feet away in the blue dark, the man this whole territory called the Duke was kissing her sister. She did not scream. She did not weep. She turned, walked back toward a house where every candle had been lit for a celebration that was never hers, and said nothing at all. Nothing until a letter, hidden 11 years beneath her floorboards, told her exactly why they had always been afraid of her. If you want to see where a woman like that ends up, subscribe to the channel and stay with me all the way to the end of this story. And do me a kindness, comment the city you're watching from, so I can see just how far Eleanor's story has traveled tonight. Montana Territory, summer 1818. Eleanor Hayes had lit 41 candles that evening, and not one of them had been lit for her. She counted them, the way she counted everything else in that house, quietly, accurately, and without being asked. 41 candles. 12 bottles of her father's imported claret. 19 guests. 22 if you counted the Pettigrew boys, who did not count for much. 3 hired girls from town, paid out of a household account that Eleanor herself balanced every Sunday night by lamplight while the rest of them slept. She had gone out to the orchard for one reason. The ice house. Miss Eleanor. One of the hired girls, Nell, breathless at her elbow in the kitchen doorway. Your father's asking after the ice. He's had 4 glasses already. He's asking, miss. Then he'll get it. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron, untied it, folded it, set it on the rail. 10 years of habit. Fold it, set it down, keep your voice level. Tell him 5 minutes. Yes, miss. Nell hesitated. Miss, you ain't been in the parlor once tonight. I've been in the kitchen. That ain't the same as being at the party. No, Eleanor agreed. It ain't. She took the lamp and went out. The orchard path ran behind the house, past the smokehouse, down toward the ice house. Her mother had insisted on building the last summer she was strong enough to insist on anything. Eleanor had walked that path perhaps 4,000 times. She could have walked it with her eyes shut, which is why she did not need the lamp to know that there were 2 people standing at the fence line, and why she knew both of them. She stopped. The taller shape said something low, and the smaller shape laughed a bright, practiced, silver little laugh that Eleanor had heard across dinner tables and church pews and the whole of her sister's 22 years. Then the taller shape bent down, and Eleanor Hayes stood in the dark and watched Nathaniel Ashford kiss her sister Charlotte. They called him the Duke. Half the territory did. His father had come over from England with money already in his pockets, and had bought up more grazing land in 11 years than most men saw in a lifetime. And when the old man died, the son had inherited the acres, the horses, the accent, and the nickname, the Duke of the Territory. Men tipped their hats to him on the street. Women corrected their posture. And for 2 years, Nathaniel Ashford had ridden out to the Hayes Ranch every second Thursday. 2 years. He had sat in her father's study and talked cattle prices with Eleanor, because Eleanor was the only person in that house who knew what cattle prices were. He had asked her opinion on the North pasture. He had once said she remembered the exact weight of it. You've the finest head for business I've met on either side of the ocean, Miss Hayes. He had never once said she was beautiful. She had told herself that was better. She had told herself that a man who valued your mind was worth 10 who valued your face. She had told herself a great many things in 2 years, quietly at night while balancing accounts. Her lamp was still burning in her hand. She set it down in the grass slowly so it would not clink. She pressed her palm flat against the top rail of the fence, and she made herself keep watching, the way you make yourself look at a wound before you decide what to do about it. Then Charlotte said something, and Nathaniel laughed, and the 2 of them started up the path toward the house, toward her, and Eleanor Hayes did the only thing she had ever been trained to do. She stepped back into the dark and let them pass. They walked right by her. Charlotte's white skirt brushed the grass 18 inches from Eleanor's boot. Nathaniel's hand was at the small of her sister's back. Neither of them turned their head. She had spent 10 years making herself useful. It had made her invisible. She stood there long enough for the crickets to start up again. Then she picked up her lamp, went down to the ice house, chipped the ice herself with a pick that was too heavy for her, carried the bucket back up the hill alone, and walked in the kitchen door with her chin level. Ice, she said. Nell looked at her face. Miss Eleanor. Chip it fine. He likes it fine. The parlor smelled of claret and beeswax and too many people. Eleanor came in the side door with a tray she had not been asked to carry because carrying something gave a woman a reason to be in a room. And I said to him, I said, sir, in this country, a man's word is his bond. 40 cents a head, and that's if the river holds. Eleanor. Mrs. Pettigrew, planted by the fireplace like a fence post, caught her sleeve. There you are, child. I was saying to Mrs. Doyle just this minute, I said that girl works harder than any 2 hired men in the county. Thank you, ma'am. It ain't a compliment exactly, dear, it's an observation. Mrs. Pettigrew's eyes went over her, cataloging the plain gray dress, the hair pinned back without a single curl allowed to fall. You've never been one for the fuss, have you? No, ma'am. Well, the older woman patted her arm the way you pat a good horse. Somebody's got to keep the world turning while the pretty ones dance in it. Across the room, Charlotte was dancing in it. She stood in the center of a half-circle of men, with her cheeks flushed and her white dress catching the candlelight, and Nathaniel Ashford stood at her shoulder with his hand not quite touching her, and every single person in that parlor understood what they were looking at. Eleanor set the tray down. Ellie. Her father's voice. William Hayes had a voice that had closed 100 land deals, warm on the surface, iron underneath. Sir? Come here a moment. She went. She always went. How was 55 silver at the temples, and he had the particular ease of a man standing in a house he believed he had built himself. He put an arm around her shoulders, which he had not done in perhaps 4 years, and something in Eleanor's chest went cold before her mind caught up. Friends. He raised his glass. Friends, if I may. The room quieted. Somebody shushed the fiddler. Now most of you have known this family a long while, William said. You knew my Margaret, rest her. You've watched my girls grow up under this roof, and tonight I've got an announcement that I hope you'll take in the spirit it's given. Eleanor's father's arm was heavy on her shoulders. My eldest, he said, has been the backbone of this house for 10 years. There ain't a ledger she can't balance, a fever she can't break, or a hired man she can't put in his place. Warm laughter. Which is why the good people at the Carter place, out past the Sweetgrass, have asked for her particular. Eleanor's face did not change. She had 10 years of practice. Eleanor will be leaving us tomorrow morning, her father said, to take up the management of that household. And I'll say plain, it's a sacrifice. But an eldest daughter knows what sacrifice is for. There was a silence. It went on one beat too long. Somebody near the window said, housekeeper, and somebody else hushed them, and that was worse, that hushing, than the word itself. Mrs. Pettigrew's mouth had come open. Old Doc Merriman by the door took his pipe out of his mouth and did not put it back. And Charlotte in her new white dress bought in St. Louis, with money out of an account Eleanor kept. Charlotte looked at the floor. Well, Nathaniel Ashford said pleasantly, that's a piece of luck for the Carters. Eleanor turned her head and looked at him. She looked at him for perhaps 2 seconds. He was the first to look away. Ellie, her father said, say something to the folks. 10 years. 10 years of ledgers, fevers, and hired men. I hope, Eleanor said in a voice that carried clean to the back of the room, that the Carters find me useful. And she picked up her tray and walked out. She got as far as the hall before her father caught up with her. Eleanor. The glasses want washing. Leave the damn glasses. He shut the study door behind them both. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Sit down. She sat. Her back did not touch the chair. William Hayes went around behind his desk, her desk in every way that mattered. She was the one who sat at it 4 nights a week with the account books, and he poured himself another drink he did not need. You're angry. No, sir. Don't do that. He pointed at her with the glass. Don't do that thing your mother did where you go polite as a Sunday, and I got to spend 3 days digging for what you actually think. You'd like to know what I actually think. I would. You announced it, Eleanor said, to 19 people, before you said one word to me. If I'd said it to you first, you'd have argued. Yes. Well, he drank. There it is. How long have you known? 6 weeks. 6 weeks. She had balanced the June accounts 12 days ago. She had sat across from him and gone through every line, and he had said, "Good girl, Ellie," and he had known for 4 weeks by then. "The Carters," she said. "Out past the sweetgrass. Samuel Carter. Good man. Hard luck the last 3 seasons, but a good man." "And what does the good man pay?" Her father's jaw moved. "It ain't about the pay." "No," Eleanor agreed. "I don't imagine it is." She folded her hands. "Say it plain, Pa. You've never once in your life been shy about money. Don't get shy now. Charlotte's going to be married." There it was. "To Ashford," Eleanor said. "He'll ask by autumn. Everybody in that parlor knows it." William set his glass down. "Ellie, do you understand what that is? That's every acre from here to the river. That's the Hayes name tied to Ashford land for 3 generations. That's a thing I have worked for since before you were born. And I'm in the way of it." "You ain't in the way of it. He came here every second Thursday for 2 years. Her voice stayed level. It cost her something, but it stayed level. "He came to talk to me. I did his figures for him. I told him not to buy the Doyle bottom land, and I was right, and he told you I was right, and you laughed and said I had a head like a man's." Eleanor. And then Charlotte turned 22. Her father was quiet. "You didn't want him to keep coming to the study," Eleanor said slowly, working it out loud the way she worked out a column of figures. "Because a man who comes for the conversation might get an idea, and an idea like that would cost you the whole thing, so you send the conversation away." "That's an ugly way to put it." "Is it a wrong way?" "You're 4 and 20, William Hayes said. "You've had 2 offers in your life, and you turned down both of them. One was Ezra Pettigrew, who is a fool. He's a fool with 300 acres. And the other," Eleanor said, "was a widower of 61 who wanted somebody to nurse him. Which I would have done. Which I have done, Pa, for 4 years with my own mother in this house, while Charlotte was at school in St. Louis on money I found by cutting the hay contract." The clock ticked. "Nobody asked you to do that," her father said. Eleanor Hayes went very still. "What? Nobody asked you to run the books. Nobody asked you to sit up with your mother every night. You took it on yourself, girl, and then you carried it around like a debt everybody owed you. Nobody asked. That's right." "No." She stood up. "No, sir, that ain't right, and you know it ain't. You asked. In November of the year Ma got sick. You sat in that chair with your head in your hands, and you said, 'Ellie, I can't do it. I can't look at these numbers and look at her too.' And I said I'd take the numbers. I was 14 years old." Her father did not answer. "And I have taken them every year since," Eleanor said, "and not once has any person in this house said thank you. And I made my peace with that. I truly did. I told myself being needed was enough." She put her hands flat on the desk. "It ain't," she said. "Being needed is not the same as being loved. It took me 10 years to learn the difference, and I learned it tonight in an orchard." Her father's head came up. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," Eleanor said. "It means I'll be packed by morning." Charlotte was waiting in the upstairs hall. She had her arms wrapped around herself, and she had been crying, which Eleanor noted with a distant, tired clarity. Charlotte cried the way other people cleared their throats. "Ellie." "It's late." "Ellie, please. I've got a trunk to fill." "I didn't know he was going to say it like that." Charlotte moved in front of the door. "I swear to you I didn't know. Not in front of the whole town. I thought he'd tell you private, and it'd be for a season just till..." "Till what?" Charlotte's mouth closed. "Till the wedding," Eleanor said. "That's the word. Say it." "Don't. You're 22, you're not a child. Say it." "Till the wedding," Charlotte whispered. Eleanor nodded once. "There. That wasn't so hard. You hate me." "No. You do. You're looking at me the way you look at a bad figure in the ledger, Charlotte." Eleanor's voice cracked just once on the second syllable, and she hated herself for it. "I have never in my life hated you. I sat up 3 nights with you when you had the scarlet fever. I sewed that dress you're wearing. Miss Abernathy sewed. Miss Abernathy sewed the bodice. I did the hem and the sleeves because there wasn't money for the whole of it, and I didn't want you to know that." Eleanor stopped, breathed. "So no, I don't hate you. But I need you to answer me one thing honest, and then I'll never ask you again as long as I live." Charlotte's chin trembled. "All right. How long?" "Ellie. How long has he been coming for you and not for the study?" The silence stretched out. "Since March," Charlotte said. "March. 4 months. 16 weeks. 8 second Thursdays, and on every one of them, Eleanor had laid out the ledgers on the study table at 2:30 and combed her hair and told herself she was not doing it for any particular reason. "I see," Eleanor said. "He said—" Charlotte's face crumpled. "He said you were the cleverest woman in the territory. He said it often. Ellie, he never stopped saying it. But he said a man doesn't want to come home to a business partner." There it was then. The whole shape of it in 11 words. "Well," Eleanor said quietly, "at least he was honest with somebody." "Ellie. Move, please. My trunk's behind you." "Ellie, will you look at me?" "I have looked at you your whole life," Eleanor said. "That's rather the trouble. Everybody has." She moved her sister aside gently, one hand on her arm, the way you move a person who is standing where they oughtn't, and went into her room and shut the door. She did not cry. She packed 2 dresses, her mother's shawl, the good boots and the working boots, a tin of writing paper, her medicine box dried yarrow laudanum willow bark, the good scissors needle and gut. 12 years of learning to close a wound because the nearest doctor was 9 miles off and drunk half of those. The knock came at the door around midnight. "Miss Hayes, Nathaniel Ashford." Eleanor stood in the middle of her room with her mother's shawl in her hands and considered seriously not answering. "Miss Hayes, I know you're awake." She opened the door 6 inches. "Mr. Ashford." He had his hat in his hands, which she noticed, and which made her want to laugh that a man could stand there with his hat in his hands as though manners were a currency you could pay a debt with. "May I?" "No." "Then I'll say it here." He glanced down the hall. "Your father's announcement tonight. I want you to know I had no part in it." "I never supposed you did." "But you're angry with me." "Mr. Ashford," Eleanor said, "I am 24 years old, and I have been running a household since I was 14. I do not have the energy to be angry with men who tell me things I already know." He flushed. Even in the dark she saw it. "That's fair." "It ain't fair. It's just true. Miss Hayes." He stopped, started again. "Eleanor, those Thursdays, they were—" He turned his hat around in his hands. "They were the best hours of my week. I want you to know that." And there it was, the thing she had waited 2 years to hear. Arriving 11 hours too late in a hallway from a man who had kissed her sister in the orchard. "Was that meant to be a kindness?" Eleanor asked. Because I'd like you to think about it for a moment, sir. You've told me I was the best hours of your week, and tomorrow I go to keep house for a stranger, and in the autumn you'll marry my sister, and for the rest of my life I'll have that sentence to carry around." She let the silence do its work. "So was that a kindness to me, Mr. Ashford? Or was it a kindness to you?" Nathaniel Ashford did not answer. "That's what I thought," Eleanor said. "I never meant— No. Men like you never do." She began to close the door. "You'll want to go down the back stairs. The 3rd one from the top calls out, and my father's a light sleeper when he's had claret." "Miss Hayes." His hand came up against the door, not hard, but there. "For what it's worth, I think your father is making the worst trade of his life." Eleanor looked at his hand until he took it away. "Everybody in that parlor thought it," she said. "Not one of you said it out loud. Good night, sir." She shut the door. Then she stood with her back against it, and she pressed both hands over her mouth, and for about 90 seconds, Eleanor Hayes was not the backbone of anything. Then she took her hands down, wiped her face with her sleeve, and went back to packing. It was near 2 in the morning when she went to move the bed. She had one thing left to take, and it was under the floor. A small oilcloth bundle of coins, $41, saved out of the egg money over 6 years, hidden under a loose board because there was no lock in that house her father did not have the key to. She pulled the bed out from the wall. She got her fingers into the gap and lifted the board. The coins were there, and behind them, pushed so far back against the joist that she had to lie flat on her stomach and reach to the shoulder, was a wooden box. Eleanor pulled it out and set it on the floor and sat looking at it for a long moment. It was walnut, about the size of a family Bible with a brass lock. She had never seen it before in her life. She knew whose it was, though. She knew the second she touched it. Her mother had had a habit of running her thumbnail along the edge of things. Boxes, book covers. The rail of the porch and the front edge of that lid was worn pale in a line right where a thumb would go. Margaret Hayes had been dead 11 years. The lock took Eleanor 4 minutes and a hairpin. She had opened harder locks than that in her father's desk when he lost the keys and would not admit it. Inside, there were 3 things. The first was a letter folded in 3 addressed in her mother's hand for Eleanor. When they send her away. Eleanor read it twice before she understood what she was reading. My Ellie. If this box has come to you, then you have found the loose board, which means you have hidden something under it, which means you have learned that in this house, a woman must keep her own things in her own dark. I am sorry for that. I taught you that lesson by living it. You are 11 years old as I write this, and you are downstairs arguing with the hayman about weight. He is 40, and you are 11, and you are winning. Your father thinks it is charming. I do not think it is charming. I think it is the most frightening thing I have ever seen, because I know exactly what this world does to a girl like you. So listen to me, child. The Sweetgrass section, 9,000 acres. The water and the bottomland east of the crossing did not come to your father through his own work, whatever he tells the town. It came through me. It was my father's, and it came to me at my marriage, and by the terms your grandfather set down, it does not pass to my husband. It passes to my eldest daughter in her own name at the age of 21. Your father knows this. He has known it since the day we married, and he has hated it every day since. He will not tell you. He will find a reason not to. He will say, you are too young, and then that you are too busy, and then that it is all the same money in the end. And by the time you are grown, he will have told himself a version of the story where it was always his. I have watched him do this with other things. He is not a wicked man, Ellie. He is a frightened one, and frightened men do more damage than wicked ones because they believe they are owed their fear. So here is what I know. One day, they will need to move you out of the way. Perhaps for your sister. Perhaps for a marriage or a debt or a bargain. And when that day comes, they will dress it up as duty, and they will say that the eldest must sacrifice. And you, my good girl, you will want to be good. You have always wanted to be good. My darling, I am asking you to be something better than good. And know this, if you know nothing else. If they are sending you away, it is not because you are worth less than the others. It is because they are afraid of what you are worth. Your mother, Margaret Ann Sweet Hayes. The second thing in the box was a deed. Eleanor unfolded it with hands that had gone entirely steady, the way they always went steady when something was serious. 9,000 acres. The Sweetgrass section. The water rights on the creek, which in a dry country was worth more than the ground. Recorded in the Territorial Register at Fort Union, dated 11 years and 4 months ago. Registered to Eleanor Margaret Hayes. The third thing was a single sheet of paper in a lawyer's hand, and it was the shortest document of the 3, and it was the one that made her sit back on her heels. It was a lease, signed by William Hayes as guardian. 99 years, payable to the Hayes Ranch. Executed the spring after her mother's funeral, when Eleanor was 13 years old and sitting up nights with the account books because her father could not bear to look at numbers. Eleanor read the property description at the bottom. The Sweetgrass section and all lands appurtenant east of the crossing, including the improvements known as the Carter Place. She read it again. The Carter Place. Out past the Sweetgrass. Samuel Carter. Good man. Hard luck the last 3 seasons. Hard luck. For 3 seasons, a man had been paying rent on land he did not know was hers, to a father who did not own it on a lease signed for a 13-year-old girl who was in the next room adding up his payments in a ledger and calling them Sweetgrass Income Emisk. Eleanor Hayes sat on the floor of her childhood bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning with 3 pieces of paper in her lap, and every single thing she had believed about the last 11 years quietly rearranged itself. They had not sent her away because she was plain. They had not sent her away because Charlotte was prettier, or because a man doesn't want to come home to a business partner, or because the eldest must sacrifice. She was 24 years old. She had come into that land 3 years ago, and her father had spent those 3 years standing between her and a piece of paper. And now he was marrying her sister into the Ashford Acres, and the Ashford Acres bordered the Sweetgrass on the west, and any man who married Charlotte Hayes would want a clean line on that boundary before he signed anything. They were not sending her to be a housekeeper. They were sending her out of the county to a house on her own land where she would be too grateful and too busy and too far from the territorial register to ever ask a question. "Oh," Eleanor said out loud to the empty room, and she began very quietly to laugh. It was not a good laugh. It had something torn in the middle of it. She put her fist against her mouth and laughed into it until her eyes ran, and then she stopped and wiped her face and sat there in the dark breathing. Then she folded the deed. She folded the lease. She folded her mother's letter, last and slowest, and pressed the crease flat with her thumb. And she did not put them back under the board. She sewed them into the lining of her mother's shawl with the good needle 40 small stitches, and she was finished by 3. At 4:30, she came down the stairs with her trunk. The house was dead quiet. 41 candles, all of them burned out. She set the trunk by the front door. Then she went into the study, and by the gray light of the window, she took out the household ledger and opened it to July. She did not steal anything. She wanted that clear later in her own mind. She took nothing that was not hers. She simply wrote in the neat slanted hand that every merchant between there and Fort Union would have recognized accounts closed to date. Balance $1,114.60 dirhams verified. All hands paid through the 30th. The hay contract renews on the 12th of August. It must be signed before the 12th or the price goes to 60. The mare in the second stall is favoring her off hind and wants seeing to. Doc Merriman is owed $9 from March. I have kept these books for 10 years. They are correct. E. M. Hayes. She closed the ledger and set the pen down square beside it. Then she stood for a moment in the doorway of the room where she had spent 10 years of her life making a man look competent. Ellie Nell in the hall in a shawl hair down her back. "Go back to bed, Nell. Cook says there's a wagon come up the road already." The girl's eyes were red. "Miss, ain't you going to wake 'em? Ain't you going to say goodbye to your pa?" Eleanor picked up her trunk. "No," she said. "But they'll know I'm gone when the ice don't get chipped," Eleanor said, "and the sums don't get done, and the hay contract goes to 60. They'll know I'm gone by August, Nell. They just won't know why yet." She stepped out onto the porch. The wagon was coming up the road in the gray light, and a man was walking at the head of the team, tall, brown-haired, sun-dark, moving with the particular stiffness of somebody who had been a soldier and had not entirely stopped. He drew up in the yard and looked at the big house, and then at the woman standing on the porch at 4:45 in the morning with a trunk in her hand and nobody to see her off. He took his hat off. "Ma'am, I'm looking for Miss Hayes." "You found her. Samuel Carter." He glanced at the dark windows of the house and then back at her, and something moved behind his face, not pity, which she would not have forgiven. Something more like recognition. "I reckon I'm early. I can wait if there's folks want to say goodbye." "There ain't?" "Ma'am." "Mr. Carter." Eleanor came down the steps and set her trunk in the wagon bed herself before he could take it from her. "How far is your place?" 26 miles, past the Sweetgrass." "Past the Sweetgrass," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Ain't much out there. I'll tell you plain now rather than have you find out at supper. The roof leaks in 2 places. The hands are down to 3 men, and I got no earthly business hiring anybody." He turned his hat in his hands. Your father made it sound like a favor to me. I ain't fool enough to think it was." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said. "It wasn't." "Then why are you coming?" And Eleanor Hayes, standing in the yard of her father's house, with 9,000 acres sewn into her mother's shawl, thought about telling him. She did not. She would. In time. When she had walked the ground herself and read the boundary and found out what manner of man he was when a season went bad. Her mother had been right about one thing above all others in this world. A woman kept her own things in her own dark until she was sure. "Because it's mine to do," she said. "Are we going, Mr. Carter, or are we standing here till they wake up?" Samuel Carter looked at her for a second longer than was polite. Then he put his hat back on and handed her up onto the bench and did not say another word about it. The wagon turned out of the yard at 10 minutes to 5. Behind her 41 candles sat burned down to the sockets, and a ledger lay closed on a desk, and a father slept who had been so afraid of what his daughter might become that he had spent 11 years making sure she never found out. Eleanor Hayes did not look back at the house. She looked west toward the sweetgrass, and she counted quietly, accurately, and without being asked the miles until she got there. They rode 9 miles before Samuel Carter said anything at all. And when he did, it was not what Eleanor expected. "You didn't eat." "I beg your pardon. Cook had a plate out on the kitchen sill for you. I saw it through the window when I come up. It's still sitting there." He kept his eyes on the team. 26 miles is a long way on nothing, ma'am." "I wasn't hungry." "No," he agreed. "I don't reckon you were." She let that sit for a mile. Then, because she had spent 10 years learning that the fastest way to the truth of a man was through his accounts, she said, "Mr. Carter, what do you pay for the sweetgrass grazing?" His hands didn't move on the lines, but something in his shoulders did. "That's a queer question from a housekeeper. I kept my father's book since I was 14. I'd be poor company if I didn't ask about money. $340 a year," he said. "Paid to your father 1st of March in coin at the Fort Union Bank. Been paying it 7 years. A pause. "Missed it twice. Made it up both times with interest." Eleanor looked straight ahead at the rumps of the horses and made her face do absolutely nothing. $340, 7 years. She had entered those payments herself in her own hand in a column she had labeled Sweetgrass Misc, because her father had told her at 13 that it was rent off a bit of scrub that wasn't worth the ink. "That's a high figure," she said, "for scrub." "It ain't scrub, ma'am. It's the only year-round water inside 40 miles. He glanced over. "Your daddy never told you that." "My father," Eleanor said, "tells me a great many things." They came in on the Carter place a little before noon, and Eleanor got down off the wagon before he could hand her down and stood in the yard and understood inside of 30 seconds why William Hayes had been so eager to be generous. There were 3 men. There should have been 9. The corral rail was mended with rope in 4 places, which meant somebody had run out of nails and then run out of the money for nails. And there was a boy sitting on the porch step with his arm wrapped in a shirt sleeve gray in the face, trying to look like he wasn't. Eleanor set down her trunk. "How long has that boy's arm been broke?" Samuel turned. "Pip." "2 days, sir," the boy said. "It ain't broke. It's broke," Eleanor said. "You've got your shoulder up around your ear to keep the weight off it, and you've been sweating in the shade. Somebody boil water." "Mr. Carter, I want a straight board about 18 inches and whiskey if you've got it." Nobody moved. "Ma'am," said the oldest of the 3, a bandy-legged man of 60 with a white mustache. "Beggin' your pardon, but Doc Merriman's 9 miles off. Doc Merriman is drunk by 10 in the morning, and it's near noon. Board, water, whiskey." There was a silence in that yard, about 4 seconds long, and in it, Eleanor felt every one of them decide something about her. Samuel Carter said, "Toby, get the board." She set the boy's arm on the porch step in front of God, and everybody with the old man holding his shoulders and Samuel holding his wrist, and Pip screamed once, and then didn't again, and when it was done and splinted, she sat back on her heels with blood on her cuffs and said, "You'll keep that sling on 6 weeks, or you'll have a crooked arm the rest of your life. Do you understand me?" Yes, ma'am. Say it back. 6 weeks or a crooked arm. Good boy. She stood. Now, Mr. Carter, where are your books? He looked at her the way a man looks at weather coming. You're the housekeeper. I am. Housekeepers keep house. Then show me the house, Eleanor said. And after I've kept it, show me the books because I've counted your fence rails, your hands and your horses, and I'd like to know which of us is going to say out loud that you're 11 months from losing this place. Samuel Carter didn't answer that for a long moment. Then he said quietly, 6 months. Beg pardon. 6 months, ma'am, not 11. That night she sat at his table with a lamp and a ledger that had been kept by a man who was honest and could not add, and by 10 o'clock she knew more about Samuel Carter than his own hands did. He'd come out of the war with a settlement and a limp. He'd bought 200 head and married a woman named Ada in 1811 and buried her in 1814, which Eleanor learned not from him, but from a line in the book. Coffin boards and nails, 410, written in a hand that got shaky halfway through and never quite got steady again. He gave away beef. That was the thing that struck her hardest going down the columns. 3 head to the Doyles in the hard winter, entered at no charge. 2 to the mission. A milk cow simply gone out of the book in March of 16 with the notation, Widow Sanchez girl sick. He came in at 10:30 and found her still there. You'll ruin your eyes. You gave away 11 head in 4 years. I know what I gave away. You also paid Halloran at the Mercantile in Fort Union 31% over the Miles City price for wire, salt, and coffee every quarter for 3 years. She turned the book around. That's $490, Mr. Carter. That's a year and a half of your rent. He stared at the page. Halloran gives me credit. Nobody else will. Halloran gives credit because he's found a man too proud to ask what a thing costs elsewhere. Eleanor closed the ledger. I can save you $300 before the first frost, and I haven't touched a cow yet. How? By writing 4 letters and being extremely unpleasant in one of them. And Samuel Carter, a man who had not laughed out loud in 2 years, as she would learn later from Toby, put his hand over his mouth and laughed. The letters went out on Thursday. By the second week of July, the freight came in from Miles City at a price that made Halloran's clerk turn the color of paste. And by the 3rd week, Eleanor Hayes had taken over the tally book, the hay contract, and the feeding of 5 men, and the Carter place had begun very slightly to stop bleeding, none of which made her welcome. She learned that on her first trip into Fort Union, standing at the counter of the Mercantile with a list in her hand, while Halloran took his time about the woman behind her and the woman after that. Mr. Halloran? I see you, miss. I don't believe you do. I've been standing here 11 minutes. He came over at last, wiping his hands with that particular smile a man wears when he's already decided how a conversation ends. Well, the Hayes girl, Miss Hayes. Out at Carter's now, they say. He leaned on the counter. Housekeeping. Managing. That's so. He looked past her at the 2 women by the dry goods and pitched his voice for them. Because the word that come down from your daddy's place was housekeeper. Word was there was a party, and it was said in front of the whole county, and there wasn't a soul there didn't feel sorry for you. Eleanor did not blink. Mr. Halloran, does the Carter account stand at $81.40? It does. Then here's $81.40. She counted it onto the countercoin out of an oilcloth bundle, $41 of egg money, and $40 saved out of the freight difference, and she counted it slow, and the whole store went quiet listening to it. The account's closed. We'll be freighting out of Miles City hereafter. And Mr. Halloran, the next time you feel sorry for me, do it in a whisper. It's cheaper and it lasts longer. She walked out. One of the women by the dry goods started to laugh and turned it into a cough. She got as far as the wagon before her hands started shaking, and she stood there holding the wheel spoke until they stopped. And when she looked up, Samuel Carter was leaning against the tailgate with his hat pushed back, having heard every word through the open door. You didn't have to do that with your own money, he said. It wasn't charity. I'll take it back out of the freight savings by September. That ain't what I meant, ma'am, and you know it. Then say what you mean, Mr. Carter. He tipped his hat down against the sun, which she had begun to notice he did when he wanted a second to think. I mean, a man in that store just told the whole town your own daddy shamed you in front of 19 people, he said, and you didn't so much as flinch. That's a thing you learn. And I'd sooner not know what it cost you to learn it. Eleanor got up on the bench. Drive, she said. It took her until the last week in July to ride the boundary. She did it alone at first light with her mother's shawl folded in the saddlebag and the deed sewn into the lining of it, and she rode east from the crossing with the language of that deed running through her head like a psalm. Thence northerly, along the creek to the stone cairn, thence east 1,400 rods to the twin cottonwoods. The cairn was there. The cottonwoods were there, twin-trunked out of one root exactly as some surveyor had written down 11 years ago and never thought of again. And so was the Carter house. She sat her horse on the rise above it for a long time. 9,000 acres. The water. The bottomland. The improvements known as the Carter. Place the barn, the corrals, the well, the house with the leaking roof, and the man asleep inside it, who had paid $340 a year for 7 years to rent land from a man who did not own 1 foot of it. Well, Eleanor said out loud to the horse, now you know. She rode back in and did not tell him. She told herself it was prudence. A woman alone with 9,000 acres and no lawyer inside 200 miles had exactly one advantage in this world, and that was that nobody knew she had it. She told herself she needed to see how he was in a bad week. She told herself a dozen sensible things, and every one of them was true, and none of them was the real reason. The real reason was that Samuel Carter had begun somewhere around the middle of July to ask her opinion at supper. And she was not ready to find out whether he'd keep asking it after he learned she owned the ground. The table stood on. The letter from Charlotte came on the 1st of August. Eleanor read it standing in the yard, and read it twice, and then went and sat on the well curb. Ellie Pay has took the hay to Kendrick at 60 a ton, exactly like your note said, because he did not sign by the 12th. He was in a black rage for 2 days. He says it was the drought. Cook says it was the note. Ellie, there is to be an engagement. Nathaniel spoke to Pa on the 24th. It is to be announced at the harvest supper, and I am to be married in October, and I cannot write down here what I feel about it, because if I write it down, it will be true. He asks after you. Every time. He asks it careful, like a man checking a step, before he puts weight on it. I have stopped answering. There is one more thing, and I am afraid to tell you. 2 weeks ago, Pa had Judge Ballard out from Fort Union, and they were shut in the study 4 hours, and Pa sent Cook and me clean out of the house. I went back for my shawl, and I heard Pa say your name, and I heard him say 1 and 20, and I heard the judge say a word I did not know. Disaffirm. I have wrote it down as it sounded. Ellie, what does disaffirm mean? Eleanor sat on the well curb with the letter in her lap, and felt every hair on her arm stand up. She knew what it meant. She had read enough of her father's contracts to know exactly what it meant. A minor could not be bound. A guardian could sign a lease over a child's property, and the child on coming of age could stand up and unmake it, could disaffirm it, and every dollar taken under it since became a debt owed back. She had turned 21 3 years ago in March. Her guardianship had ended that day, and her father had gone on collecting $340 a year from Samuel Carter for 3 years afterward, with no more right to it than a man collecting rent on his neighbor's house. $20. And he had brought a judge out to the house to ask what it would cost him if she ever found out. Eleanor got up off the well curb, went inside, and wrote a letter to the Territorial Register at Fort Union, asking for a certified copy of every instrument recorded against the Sweetgrass section since 1807, and she signed it E.M. Hayes, the way she signed everything, because a clerk 200 miles off had no way of knowing that E.M. Hayes was a woman. It went out with the Miles City freighter on the 3rd. On the 4th, Nathaniel Ashford rode into the Carter yard. She was at the corral when he came, and she did not stop counting the yearlings until she'd finished the row, and then she turned around. Mr. Ashford. Miss Hayes. He got down. He had his hat in his hands again, and she thought distantly that she had never once seen that man's hat on his head when he was talking to her about anything that mattered. You look well. I look brown. It ain't the same thing. May I have a quarter of an hour? You may have 10 minutes. There's 5 men wanting supper." He smiled at that, a real one, quick and pained. "You always did keep a man to his figures." "I'm about to keep you to them," Eleanor said. "Say your piece." He said his piece. He said it well, too. She gave him that. He said the announcement at the harvest supper was a formality, that his feelings had been misrepresented, that a man could mistake his own heart when a family put a pretty girl in front of it every second Thursday, that he had spent the summer riding out to the north pasture, where he'd once stood arguing about the Doyle bottomland with a woman who knew more about it than he did. "And I'm asking you," he finished, "if it ain't too late." Eleanor leaned on the corral rail. "Mr. Ashford, do you know what today is?" "The 4th. "It's the 4th. On the 24th of last month, you spoke to my father about my sister. That's 11 days ago." She let it land. 11 days. That's how long it took you. I'd have thought a thing like a heart would take longer. His face changed. "Eleanor, you're going to tell me you didn't know your own mind, and I believe you. That's the pity of it, I do believe you." She pushed off the rail. "But here's what you've never once considered, sir, and I'd like you to consider it now. Charlotte is 22 years old. She's been taught since she could walk that her whole worth was in being chosen. And you chose her in front of the county, and now you've ridden 26 miles to tell the Plain sister that it was a mistake. That ain't fair." "It ain't fair to her," Eleanor said. "That's my point. You are about to break that girl in half, and you have come here to ask my permission to do it so that when it's done, you can tell yourself it was love and not cowardice." Nathaniel Ashford stood in that yard and did not have one word to say. "Now," Eleanor said, "what's in your coat?" "What?" "You've touched your breast pocket 4 times since you got off that horse. What's in it?" He went white. She held out her hand and waited, and after a moment, he took the paper out and gave it to her, and Eleanor Hayes unfolded it in the yard and read it. It was a quitclaim. 4 lines of it in a lawyer's copperplate releasing all right, title, and interest in the Sweetgrass section from Eleanor Margaret Hayes to William Hayes, his heirs and assigns forever in consideration of $1 and natural love and affection. There was a line at the bottom for her signature. Somebody had already witnessed it. Judge Ballard's name was there, dated the 28th of July, a week before anyone had asked her a single question. Eleanor looked up. "Did you know what this was?" "He said it was a family paper, Mr. Ashford." Her voice was so quiet it took the whole yard down with it. "You are a man who has bought and sold land since you were 19 years old. Do not stand in front of me and tell me you carried a quitclaim in your coat for 26 miles and never read it." He didn't answer. "Say it." "I read it," Nathaniel Ashford said. And he told me you didn't know, and he told me you'd sign it if it come from me." He looked at her wretched. "And I told myself that if I brought it out here, and you signed it, then I'd have done him a service, and there'd be nothing left standing between me and Charlotte's dowry." "No." "Then between you and a clean boundary line," Eleanor said, "which is the same sentence in a better coat." She folded the quitclaim. She folded it small. "Miss Hayes, 9,000 acres, Mr. Ashford. That's what's on that paper. 9,000 acres, and the only year-round water inside 40 miles. And my father asked you to get it off me for $1 and natural love and affection." She put the paper in her apron pocket. "Now you tell me something honest, and I'll let you ride out of here with your hat on. When he handed you that, did he seem like a man doing a piece of business, or did he seem afraid?" Nathaniel swallowed. "Afraid," he said. "He's been afraid since June, ma'am. His hands ain't steady. He's borrowed against the herd twice." "Borrowed from who?" "That I don't know." "Find out," Eleanor said, "and write it to me, and that will be the last thing I ever ask of you in this life." He got on his horse. He sat there a moment. "He said something else," Nathaniel said. "When he give me the paper, he said, 'She'll sign it. She's a good girl.'" Eleanor Hayes laughed once short, with nothing pleasant in it. "He's been telling himself that for 10 years, she said. "It's the only figure he ever got wrong." She was still standing in the yard with her hand in her apron pocket when she realized Samuel Carter was on the porch. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." "How long, Mr. Carter?" "Since he said 9,000 acres." She didn't move. He came down the steps slow, and he stopped a good 6 feet off, which she understood later was deliberate, and he turned his hat around once in his hands. "That land," he said. "The sweetgrass." "Yes." "The land I've been paying your father $340 a year on for 7 years." "Yes." "It's yours." "It's mine," Eleanor said. "It's been mine outright since I was 1 and 20. It was left to me by my mother's father in 1807, and my father leased it to you in 1811 as my guardian when I was 13 years old, and I entered your payments in his book myself and thought I was writing down rent on scrubland." She made herself hold his eyes. "I found the deed the night before I came here. I've known since the day I rode the boundary. I've had 11 days to tell you, and I did not tell you." Samuel Carter stood there. "Why not?" "Because I didn't know you," Eleanor said. "And because a woman with 9,000 acres and no man to speak for her has got exactly one thing going for her, and that's that nobody knows she has them. And because—" she stopped. Because you'd started asking my opinion at supper," she said, "and I liked it, and I was afraid it would stop." The silence went on so long she could hear the yearlings shifting in the corral. Then Samuel said, "Ma'am, I got to ask you something, and I need you to not spare me." "Ask it." "Am I squatting on your ground?" "You're leasing it. There's a lease. It's 99 years and it's signed. By a man who didn't own it. By a man who had the right to sign it for me while I was a child," Eleanor said, "and no right at all to collect on it after I turned 1 and 20. She took a breath. "Mr. Carter, I want you to understand what that means because it's going to matter. 3 years of your payments, $1,020 went into my father's pocket with no more right than a thief. That money is owed. It's owed to you, or it's owed to me, and either way, it comes out of William Hayes. And the lease. The lease stands if I let it stand. And if you don't." Eleanor looked at him. "Then I own the barn, the corrals, the well, and the roof you sleep under, and you're a man with 3 hands and no ground." She had expected a great many things from Samuel Carter in that moment. She had braced for all of them: the anger, the shame, the terrible careful politeness of a proud man who has just found out he owes his life to a woman. What she had not braced for was that he'd sit down on the porch step, put his hat on his knee, and start to laugh. "Mr. Carter." "I'm sorry, ma'am." He got hold of himself. "I'm sorry. It ain't funny. It's just—" He rubbed his face with his hand. 7 years. 7 years I've been sending that money to Fort Union thinking I was keeping a bargain with a big man who'd break me if I missed it. And all that time the person I was actually paying was sitting in his study doing his sums for free. Yes. "That's the meanest thing I ever heard in my life," Samuel said, "and I was at Tippecanoe." He stood up. He put his hat on properly this time, and looked at her from under it. "So what do you aim to do?" "I aim," Eleanor said, "to get a certified copy of every instrument recorded against that section since 1807. And then I aim to walk into the territorial register at Fort Union and disaffirm a lease signed for a 13-year-old girl. And then, Mr. Carter, I aim to write you a new one, at a fair figure in my own name, so that no man living can ever take this place off you again." He was quiet. "And what do you want from me in the meantime?" "Nothing you ain't already doing." "Ma'am," he said it gently, "that ain't how I was raised. You tell me what you want." Eleanor thought about it. "I want you to keep asking my opinion at supper," she said, "after you've had a night to sleep on all this. That's what I want." The letter from Nathaniel came 10 days later, and it was 2 sentences long, and Eleanor read it in the doorway and had to put her hand on the frame. The note on the Carter herd was sold out of the Fort Union Bank in April. It was bought by William Hayes. She was still holding it when Toby came around the corner of the house at a dead run, and the old man was 60 and had not run in 15 years. "Miss Eleanor, the granary." She smelled it before she got around the barn. The wind had been out of the southwest all week, and it had been 90 degrees for 9 straight days, and there was 1,400 bushels of winter feed in that granary, and it was the whole of the Carter place's next 6 months standing in one wooden building. Samuel was already at the door with a bucket. "Get back." "How long's it been going?" "Get back, Eleanor." "How long?" 2 minutes, maybe 3. Reuben's seen the smoke off the ridge. Then it's in the west wall and not the crib yet. She was already turning. Toby, the wagon team hitched them and backed the wagon to the east door. We're not putting it out. We're taking the grain out the other side. Pip, you've got one arm. You're on the bell, ring it till your hand falls off. The Doyles are 2 miles and they'll hear it. Reuben wet sacks everything in the trough and get them on the east wall. I don't care if it burns. I care if it burns through. Samuel had stopped with the bucket in his hand. You can't save the building. I don't want the building, Eleanor said. I want the feed. A building is nails. That feed is your herd through February, and if it goes, you're selling stock in a buyer's market in November, and your note gets called. He looked at her 1 second longer. Then he threw the bucket down and started running for the wagon. They got the first load out in 11 minutes. The Doyles came at the bell, the old man and 3 sons, and then the Sanchez boys from the mission, and by dark, there were 19 people in that yard, half of whom had stood in the Hayes parlor in June, and looked at the floor while William Hayes announced what his eldest daughter was for. Eleanor Hayes stood on the east side of that granary in a borrowed hat with her sleeves rolled and organized them like a column. 2 line sacks go left, grain goes right, don't cross the lines or you'll trip and somebody'll go under a wheel. Mrs. Doyle, get every child under 12 behind the well and count them out loud. I want a number called every 5 minutes. You boy, what's your name? Amos, ma'am. Amos, you're on the number. Count 'em and holler it. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Doyle, that east wall's your whole job. It don't go through. Say it back. It don't go through. That's right. And it didn't. They lost the west wall and the roof and about 200 bushels, and at 4 in the morning, 19 exhausted people sat in a yard that smelled like burnt wheat, and Old Man Doyle looked around at what was left standing and said to nobody in particular, "Well, if that don't beat all." "Beat what?" said one of his sons. "Carter's got a foreman," Doyle said. "Didn't know it was a woman till about 8 o'clock this evening." Somebody laughed. And then several people did tiredly, and somebody passed a jug, and Mrs. Doyle put a blanket around Eleanor's shoulders and said, "Sit down, child, before you fall down." And Eleanor sat down on a feed sack in the dark and realized her hands were burned across both palms, and she had not noticed it happen. Samuel came and sat down next to her and put a bucket of cold water at her feet and took her wrists one and then the other and put her hands in it without asking, and neither of them said anything for a while. "They came," Eleanor said finally. "Course they came. 19 people came at 2 in the morning for a man who gives away beef and can't add." She was too tired to keep her voice steady. "Nobody ever came for us. My father's had 140 men on that place over 10 years, and not one of them would cross the road for him. That's the difference between being needed and being wanted, ma'am." "Don't," Eleanor said. "Don't say a true thing to me right now. I ain't got the strength for it." He laughed under his breath and shut up. It was Reuben who came to them at first light, and he came slow, holding something out in front of him with a rag, and his face was wrong. "Patron, Miss Eleanor." "What is it?" "It was in the ditch behind the west wall, in the grass 40 steps out." He set it down on the ground in front of them. "Nobody put it there by accident. It is empty, and it is not ours." It was a coal oil tin. Eleanor got up off the feed sack with her hands dripping and knelt down in the dirt and turned it with one knuckle until the stenciling came around into the light. Halloran and Sons, Fort Union. ACTW Hayes. Nobody in that yard said anything at all. Eleanor Hayes stayed on her knees in the ash for the length of about 4 breaths. She thought about a man who had borrowed against his herd twice since June, who had bought up the note on the Carter cattle in April, 3 months before he ever announced he was sending his daughter out here to keep house, who had sat in a study with a judge for 4 hours asking what the word disaffirm would cost him, who had put a quitclaim into the hands of the one man on earth she might have signed anything for. A ranch that failed was a ranch that got taken, and a ranch on 9,000 acres of ground she could not prove she owned until the register wrote back a ranch with a burned granary and a called note, and a herd sold cheap in November would have been taken quiet and legal and by Christmas. He hadn't sent her here to get her out of the way of Charlotte's wedding. He'd sent her here to be sitting in the house when it went under. "Miss Eleanor," Toby said carefully, "what do we do?" She stood up. She picked up the coal oil tin by the rim with the rag, the way you pick up evidence, and she held it against her hip. "Reuben, you didn't touch this with your hands." "No, miss, the rag only." "Good man." She turned to Samuel. "I want it in the strongbox in your room, and I want Mr. Doyle and Mrs. Doyle to put their names to a paper this morning, saying where it was found and who found it, and at what hour, and I'll write it out before they leave this yard. Eleanor." Samuel's voice was very low. "That's your father. I know whose it is. You take that into Fort Union and there ain't no coming back from it. Not for him. Not for you. Folks won't say he burned a granary, they'll say his daughter said it." Eleanor looked out at the 19 people asleep and half asleep in that yard, and the wall that hadn't gone through, and the boy Amos still sitting on the well curb, counting children out of habit because nobody had told him to stop. "Mr. Carter," she said, "for 10 years I kept that man's books, and I never once wrote down a figure that wasn't true, not one. He used to brag on it in town." She hefted the tin. "So he can't very well stand up now and say the numbers lie." She started for the house. Halfway there she stopped and turned around, and the morning light was full up by then, and every soul in that yard was looking at her. "And somebody go put the coffee on," Eleanor said. "These people worked all night. They'll want feeding before they ride." The affidavit was written and signed by 7 o'clock on the porch, with Mrs. Doyle holding the inkwell because Eleanor's hands were wrapped. "Read it back to me," Eleanor said. "Every word. If there's one thing in it that ain't true, I want it struck out." Old Man Doyle held the paper at arm's length and read it slow. "Found in the ditch 40 paces west of the granary wall in grass that wasn't burned. Found by Reuben Sanchez at approximately 4:30 in the morning of the 9th of August. Not handled with the bare hand. Stenciled Halloran and Sons account W. Hayes." He lowered it. "That's it as I saw it." "Then sign it." "Miss Eleanor." He didn't pick up the pen. "You know what this is." "I know exactly what it is. Your daddy hired my 2 eldest for the drive in 15, paid fare." "He does pay fare," Eleanor said. "That has nothing to do with what's on that paper. You're not signing that he burned it. You're signing where a tin lay in the grass at 4:30. That's all. If a man can't sign what he saw with his own eyes at 4:30 in the morning, then there's no use to any of us having eyes." Doyle looked at her a moment. Then he signed. So did his wife and Reuben and Toby and the boy Amos, who wrote his name in letters an inch high, because he'd only learned it that spring. Samuel put the tin in the strongbox himself and turned the key and put the key in his pocket, and then he stood there with his hand on the box and said, "Now tell me about the note." "What about it?" "Eleanor." He turned around. "You read that letter from Ashford yesterday, and you went the color of a bedsheet, and then the granary went up, and neither one of us has said the word since, so say it. Your note at the Fort Union Bank, on the herd. 200 head against $1,100, and I've been paying it down 4 years." "It was sold in April," Eleanor said. "The bank sold the paper. My father bought it." Samuel Carter did not move for a good 5 seconds. "Say that again." "William Hayes owns your note. He's owned it since April." She made herself say the rest without softening it, because he'd earned that. "Which means he bought it 3 months before he ever told anybody he was sending me out here to keep your house." 3 months. Yes. So when he stood up in front of 19 people and called it a favor to the Carters, "He already owned you," Eleanor said. "He wasn't lending me out. He was moving a bookkeeper onto a property he expected to take." Samuel put both hands on the strongbox and leaned on it and breathed. "What kind of note?" she asked. "Term or demand?" "I don't know." "You signed it." "I signed it 4 years ago in a room with a banker who talked fast, ma'am, and I was 2 weeks off burying my wife, and I'd have signed the deed to heaven." He said it flat without excuse. "It's in the box under the bed, in the tin with Ada's ring." She read it standing at the window with the light behind it, and she read it twice, and then she folded it and held it against her apron. "Demand," she said. "Meaning." "Meaning it isn't due in November or next March or in 4 years. It's due whenever the holder says it's due." Eleanor looked at him. "It's due the minute my father decides to write a letter." "And if I can't pay?" $1,100 in 10 days, or he takes the herd. And a ranch with no herd and a burned granary is a ranch a man sells for what he can get. She set the note down on the table. Mr. Carter listened to me. He can call that note any morning he likes. The only reason he hasn't is that he still thinks I'm going to sign that quitclaim, and he'd rather have the land quiet than take a herd loud. Then he's got a hand on my throat. He's got a hand on your throat, Eleanor agreed, and I'm the only thing keeping it from closing, which is a poor way to live, and we're not going to live that way long. Samuel picked his hat up off the table and turned it once. Then I reckon we're riding to Fort Union. I'm riding to Fort Union. Ma'am, you've got a burned granary, a broke boy, 3 hands and 1,400 bushels of grain sitting in a wagon under a tarp that'll heat and spoil in 4 days if it isn't spread and turned. Eleanor pulled her gloves over her bandages, wincing, and did not let it show in her voice. You've got work. I've got paper. We each do the thing we're good at. You can't hold a rein with them hands. Then I'll drive. He looked at her for a long moment, and she braced for the argument, and it didn't come. What came instead was that he went out to the barn and hitched the light wagon and put a jug of water and a blanket and a loaded shotgun under the bench, and when she came out, he said only, "Under the seat. It's loaded with birdshot. It ain't for killing a man, it's for changing his mind." Mr. Carter, you're carrying a coal oil tin with a man's name on it into a town where that man's got credit, Samuel said. Take the gun, Eleanor. She took the gun. She got to Fort Union at 4 in the afternoon on the second day, and she went to the territorial register before she went to a hotel, before she ate, before she did anything at all, and she stood at the counter with the dust still on her and said, "I wrote you a letter on the 3rd of August. E.M. Hayes." The clerk was a young man with ink on his second finger and the harried look of somebody who had been asked for too many things that week. Hayes, yes, Sweetgrass section. He went away and came back with a folder and set it down and then stopped. You're E.M. Hayes. I am. I wrote back to a Mr. You wrote back to a Hayes, Eleanor said. Open it, please. There were 4 instruments recorded against the Sweetgrass section, and she went through them standing up. The first was the deed itself, recorded in 1807, exactly as her mother had written. The second was the 99-year lease, signed by William Hayes as guardian in 1811. The third was a mortgage, and Eleanor's finger stopped on it. This one. That's a mortgage against the section, ma'am, dated the 2nd of April this year. For how much? $4,000. She had to put her hand flat on the counter. $4,000. Borrowed in April against ground. He did not own in the same month he had bought a man's cattle note at the bank across the street. Who's the mortgagee? The clerk turned the page around. Halloran and Sons. Eleanor Hayes stood very still. Say that name again. Halloran and Sons, Mercantile and Freight Fort Union. He was watching her face now. Ma'am, are you all right? What's the 4th instrument? He hesitated. Miss Hayes, I'd sooner you sat down. What's the 4th instrument? He slid it across. It was a quitclaim recorded the 30th of July, releasing all right and title in the Sweetgrass section, from Eleanor Margaret Hayes to William Hayes. His heirs, and assigns forever in consideration of $1 and natural love and affection. There was a signature at the bottom. Eleanor M. Hayes. She looked at it for a long time. It was a fair hand. Somebody had tried. They had got the slant of the E right, and they had got the loop of the H, and whoever it was had known enough to know that she crossed her T's short. But she had signed her name to 900 pages of ledger in 10 years, and there was one thing about it nobody but Eleanor Hayes knew. This is a forgery, she said. The clerk went the color of milk. Ma'am, that's a recorded instrument. It's a forgery, and I'll prove it to you in 1 minute if you'll give me a pen. I can't let you write on a recorded, not on that, on anything, on the back of your blotter. She had the pen already. Watch my hand. She signed it. Eleanor M. Hayes. And then she turned the blotter around and put her finger on the middle of it. The M, she said. I don't lift the pen. I've never lifted the pen on that M in my life. I learned to write fast, sir, Because I was doing 40 entries a night by candle, and every stroke you save is a second you get back. My M runs into the H. It's one line. She pointed at the recorded page. Look at theirs. There's a stop. There's a little pool of ink where the nib sat while somebody thought about what came next. The clerk bent over it. Then he straightened up and swore, and then he apologized for swearing, and then he said, "Who has the original of this? Who filed it?" He checked the margin. Filed by hand. There's a man's mark for the delivery. He read it. Creel. Who's Creel? He's ma'am. He drives for Halloran. Eleanor put both hands on the counter and let her head hang down for a second, and everything she had been carrying since the 9th of August turned itself over and came out the other way. He didn't do it, she said. Beg pardon. My father didn't burn that granary. She looked up. He wouldn't. He hasn't got the sand for it. He's a man who signs things and lets other people carry them. But he mortgaged land he didn't own for $4,000 to the one man in this territory who'd take that paper without asking a question, and the day that man found out the mortgage was worthless was the day he started burning things. Miss Hayes, I don't follow. You don't have to follow. Give me certified copies of all 4. Today. I'll pay whatever it costs. It's $1.50. Give me 2 of each. She was writing out the receipt when the clerk said quietly, Ma'am, there's a thing you might want to know, and I could lose this position for saying it. Say it. Judge Ballard sat in that chair by the window for 2 hours in July with your father, and I heard the whole of it because that door don't shut. He wiped his hands on his apron. The judge told him plain. He said, William, the girl came of age 3 years back, and you have took $1,020. That ain't yours. And if you had the sense God gave a goose, you would go home tonight and tell her the truth before somebody else does. And what did my father say? The clerk looked on the floor. He said, she'd never forgive me. And the judge said, she might. But she'll never forgive being lied to twice. He shrugged, helpless. And your daddy sat there a good while, and then he said, draw me a quitclaim anyhow. And the judge drew it, and he wrote his name on it as a witness to a signature that wasn't there yet. And he told your father to his face that if it come back to him, signed by any hand but yours, he'd see him in a courtroom. Eleanor stood there with the certified copies in her hand. Where is Judge Ballard right now? Went out to your daddy's place yesterday morning. There's a harvest supper Saturday, and half the county's going. The clerk paused. There's to be an engagement announced. She went to Halloran's next, which was not sensible, and she knew it was not sensible, and she went anyway. Hal was behind the counter. He saw her come in, and something crossed his face that she was glad to have seen, because it was the first thing that day that told her she was right. Miss Hayes. Mr. Halloran. She stopped 6 feet off. I've come in to ask you one question, and then I'll go. I'm at your service. Do you sell coal oil to a man named Creel on the William Hayes account? The store had 4 other people in it. Every one of them stopped. I sell coal oil to whoever's got credit. That isn't what I asked. Then I'll answer what you did ask. Halloran leaned on the counter with that same smile. Your father's account at this store runs to $1,100, and it has been drawn on by his men for 11 years. If somebody drew coal oil on it, that's between him and his men. And if you've come in here to make a suggestion about my store, miss, I'd remind you that you closed your account with your own 2 hands in front of witnesses, and I don't much care for the tone you took. $4,000, Eleanor said. His smile went off like a lamp. On the 2nd of April, you took a mortgage on 9,000 acres you can't have and never could. She said it clear enough to reach the back wall. Because that land was deeded to me in 1807 and recorded across the street, and you never once walked the 50 steps to look, because you knew what you were doing was rotten and you didn't want the answer. And on the 28th of July, a judge told my father his paper was no good. And 11 days later, a granary burned. You be careful. Your driver filed a forged deed at the register on the 30th of July, Eleanor said. It's got his mark on it in the margin, sir, in the county's own hand, and I have a certified copy in this bag. Halloran came around the counter. He got 2 steps. I wouldn't, said a voice from the door, and it was old Judge Ballard, hat in hand, 71 years old and hardly big enough to fill a doorway. I truly wouldn't, Michael. There's 5 people in this store and I'm one of them, and I've got a memory like a bear trap and nothing else to do with my afternoon. Halloran stopped. Ballard came in slow. Miss Hayes, I don't believe we've been introduced, though. I have heard your name a good deal this summer, mostly from men who were unhappy about you. Judge. Would you walk out of here with me before this fella does something he'll want to have not done? They sat in the shade behind the courthouse, and he read all 4 certified copies without saying one word. And when he got to the quitclaim, he took a pair of spectacles out of his coat and put them on and held it up to the light. That ain't your hand. No, sir. How do you know? The M, Eleanor said. He looked at her over the spectacles. Then he laughed one dry crack of a laugh and took the spectacles off. Well, he said, that'll do it. I'll do it. I've seen men hanged on less, and I've seen men freed on less. He folded the papers and gave them back to her careful, the way you hand back something loaded. Now, young woman, I'm going to tell you where you stand, and I'm going to tell you the hard end of it first. Do you want the hard end first? I always do. The mortgage is void because a man can't pledge what he don't own, and Halloran will lose $4,000, and he will hate you for the rest of his natural life. The lease is voidable at your word because you came of age and never ratified it. The 3 years of rent is a debt owed, and I could get you a judgment on it in an afternoon. And the forgery is a felony, Judge Ballard said, and if you swear a complaint on it Monday morning, the man that goes to the territorial prison for it is whoever put the pen to that paper. Not the man that wanted it, the man that held the pen. He let that sit. Now Creel filed it. That don't mean Creel wrote it. Eleanor's stomach turned over. Who else was in that house? That's the question, ain't it? The old man got up slow, one hand on his knee. Miss Hayes, I have known your father 30 years. He is a weak man with a good coat. He has never in his life done a wicked thing standing up. He does 'em sitting down with somebody else holding the pen. He put his hat on. And there's exactly one person in that house who's been taught since she could walk to do what she's told and never ask why. Eleanor did not sleep that night. She rode out at dawn, and she did not go back to the Carter place. She went east, and she came up the road to her father's house on the afternoon of the harvest supper, and there were 40 wagons in that yard. She left the horse at the fence line. She went in the kitchen door. Nell dropped a tray. Miss Eleanor. Hello, Nell. You can't, there's the whole county in the front rooms. There's to be an announcement at, the girl was gray. Miss, your father's been drinking since 2. Where's my sister? Upstairs. She ain't come down. She's been up there an hour, and Cook took her a plate, and she wouldn't open the door. Eleanor went up the back stairs, and the third one from the top called out the way it always had. She didn't knock. She opened the door and shut it behind her, and Charlotte spun around from the window with her face already ruined. Ellie, sit down. Ellie, I can't, they're waiting, Pa said at 6. Charlotte? Eleanor took the certified copy out of her bag and unfolded it and held it up. Whose hand is that? Charlotte Hayes looked at the paper, and then she made a sound Eleanor had never heard out of her in 22 years and sat down on the floor in her engagement dress. Oh God! Whose hand? Ellie. Whose hand, Charlotte? Mine, Charlotte said. The room was so quiet that Eleanor could hear the fiddler downstairs tuning up. Say it all. He came up here in July with a paper, and he said, Charlotte had her fists in her skirt. He said it was a family transfer. He said it was a thing you'd already agreed to, and you'd gone off before signing it, and there wasn't time to send. He said you'd written him a letter saying to go ahead. He said there was a letter, Ellie. Did you see it? No. Did you ask? No. Charlotte pressed both hands over her mouth. No, I didn't ask because he's my father, and he was standing in my room, and he was Ellie. He was crying. I have never in my life seen him cry. He said if it wasn't signed by the 30th, we'd lose the house. He said Nathaniel would walk away. He said, you want to help this family for once in your life? Here's how. And you sat down and you copied my name. He had a page out of the ledger for me to look at. Charlotte was rocking slightly. He tore a page out of your ledger, Ellie. He tore it out and set it beside the paper, and he stood over me and he said, slower, slower, it don't look like her. and I did it 4 times before he'd take one. 4 times. He burned the other 3 in the grate. Eleanor put her hand out and took hold of the bedpost. Charlotte, do you know what that is? It's a paper. It's a felony. Eleanor's voice came out with something torn in it. It's the territorial prison. Not for him. For the one who held the pen. That's the law. Charlotte, that's the actual law. Judge Ballard told me himself yesterday afternoon behind the courthouse. Charlotte stopped rocking. She looked up at her sister with her mouth open and absolutely nothing behind her eyes, and Eleanor watched her understand in real time what had been done to her. He knew, Charlotte whispered. Yes, he's a landman. He's bought and sold for 30 years. He knew what he was handing me. Yes. He couldn't sign it himself because if it come apart, it'd be him. Charlotte's hands had started to shake so hard the fabric of her dress moved. So he put it on me. He cried in my room and he put it on me. Charlotte. And then he went downstairs and told everybody how proud he was of his beautiful daughter. She laughed, and it was an awful sound. And Eleanor knew it, because she had made the same one on a bedroom floor at 2 in the morning with a walnut box open in front of her. Ellie, I want you to hear this, and I want you to hear it before we go down there, because after this, I don't expect you'll ever want to look at me again. Say it. When Nathaniel started coming for me in March, Charlotte said, I knew he'd been coming for you. Every second Thursday for 2 years, and you'd comb your hair out at 2:30, and I saw you do it, and I never once said, Ellie, that man's been looking at me across the table. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. I let it happen, because it was the first time in my whole life I ever had something you couldn't do better. Eleanor stood there. There was a whole speech in her, and she felt it come up, and she felt exactly how much it would have hurt, and she let it go by. Get up, she said. What? Get up off that floor. You'll ruin the dress, and there's people downstairs who've eaten our food for 20 years, and they're about to watch something. Eleanor pulled her sister up by both hands. Now listen to me. When we go down there, you say nothing. Not one word, do you understand? If you're asked a question, you look at me. Ellie, I have to tell them what I did. You will tell them when I say, and not 1 second before, and you will tell it standing up in front of a judge, when it will do some good. Eleanor took her by the chin, the way she had when Charlotte was 6 and had a splinter. You're not going to prison. Not while I'm breathing. But you don't get to feel better tonight either. You don't get to hand it over and be forgiven at a party. That's what he does. Charlotte's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I know, Eleanor said. Wash your face. They came down the front stairs together at 6:10, and the sound in that house went out room by room, like somebody walking down a hall blowing out candles. William Hayes was at the foot of the stairs with a glass in his hand. Eleanor. Sir? You weren't invited. No, she agreed. I've noticed you announce things instead. Somebody laughed and swallowed it. There were 60 people in the front rooms, and every one of them had turned. Her father's eyes went to Charlotte, and Charlotte looked at the floor, and Eleanor watched her father's face do a small, terrible calculation. Charlotte, go to your room. She'll stay, Eleanor said. This is my house. Is it? She said it pleasantly. Because I've come a long way to ask you about a house. Ellie. His voice dropped. Not here. Here's the only place it works, Eleanor said. You taught me that in June. And she turned around to the room. Good evening, she said. Most of you have known this family a long while. You knew my mother. You've eaten at that table and I served you at it, and you've stood in this room before in June, when my father announced that his eldest daughter was going out to keep another man's house. She let that hang. 19 of you were here. Not one of you said a word. I'm not blaming you. I didn't say a word either. Nobody moved. On the 9th of this month, Eleanor said, the granary at the Carter place burned. 19 of your neighbors came at the bell and we saved the feed. The Doyles were there. Reuben Sanchez was there. Mrs. Doyle counted your children behind the well. She took out the affidavit. At 4:30 in the morning, a coal oil tin was found in unburned grass 40 paces west of the wall. It stenciled Halloran and Sons' account of W. Hayes. That's sworn to by 5 people, and it's in a strongbox with the key in Samuel Carter's pocket. The noise that went through that room was not a shout. It was worse. It was 60 people all inhaling. "Now hold on," somebody started. "I'm not finished," Eleanor said, "and I'm about to say the part that surprises you." She turned and looked at her father. "I don't believe he burned it." William Hayes's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "He hasn't got it in him, and I'd rather say that here in front of you than have any of you carry the other thing home." Eleanor's voice did not rise. "But he did do this. On the 2nd of April, my father mortgaged the Sweetgrass section to Michael Halloran for $4,000. 9,000 acres, and the only year-round water inside 40 miles. Here's the recorded instrument. It's certified. You can pass it around." She held it out, and old Doc Merriman took it because somebody had to. "There's just the one difficulty with it," Eleanor said. "My father has never owned 1 foot of that ground." Doc Merriman looked up. "Bill, that land was deeded in 1807 by my grandfather to his daughter, and from her to her eldest daughter in her own name at the age of 1 and 20. Eleanor held up the second copy. "Recorded at Fort Union. It's been sitting in that register for 11 years, and any man in this room could have walked in and read it for $1.50. "Eleanor," her father said. "Eleanor, I turned 1 and 20 3 years ago in March. And for 3 years after that, my father collected $340 a year in rent on my land from Samuel Carter, which is $1,020, and I entered every one of those payments in the ledger myself, in a column he told me was scrubland." She put the papers down on the hall table. "And in April, he bought Mr. Carter's cattle note off the bank, so that when the place failed he could take it clean. And then he sent me out there, in June, in front of you." Somebody said, "Oh my Lord." "He didn't send me away because Charlotte was getting married," Eleanor said. "He sent me 26 miles out of the county so I'd be sitting in the kitchen when it went under and too grateful and too busy to ever ride into Fort Union and ask a clerk a question." "That's a lie," her father said. "Then explain the mortgage." "Ellie, explain the mortgage, Pa." And William Hayes, who had closed 100 land deals with that warm voice and that iron underneath, stood at the foot of his own staircase, in front of 60 of his neighbors, and opened his mouth, and nothing came out of it at all. "You can't," Eleanor said. "There isn't one. I've been looking for it for 2 weeks. I wanted one. I was going to put it right." He said it hoarse. "The drought took the hay. You know what the hay took you. Wrote the note yourself. 60 a ton. I was going to pay it back before anybody." "Before anybody what?" She was very quiet now. "Before anybody found out, or before I did. Before you did." "Well," Eleanor said. "There it is." Judge Ballard's voice came from the doorway where he had been standing for some while. "William, tell him what I said to you in July." The room turned. William Hayes shut his eyes. "He told me to go home and tell her. Say the rest of it. He said she might forgive me for taking it." William's voice cracked all the way across. "He said she'd never forgive being lied to twice." "And what did you do?" Ballard said. "The day after I told you that, nobody breathed. I had a quitclaim drawn," William said. "And on the 30th day of July," said the judge, "that quitclaim was filed at the Territorial Register bearing this young woman's signature, and she was 26 miles away and had never seen it." He came into the room small and old and absolutely unhurried. "Now, Bill, I want you to tell these people whose hand wrote that name, because I have known you 30 years, and I would give a good deal to hear you say it yourself." Eleanor felt Charlotte start forward beside her and put a hand on her sister's arm, hard. William Hayes looked at his younger daughter. He looked at her for a long, long moment, and everyone in that room watched him do it, and Eleanor understood that she was watching the last honest choice her father would ever be offered. "Charlotte wrote it," he said. Charlotte made a small sound. "Because I asked her to," William said. "Because I told her there was a letter. There wasn't a letter. I stood over that child and made her do it 4 times till it looked right, and I burned the ones that didn't." He was crying now openly in front of 60 people. "And she never asked me one question, because she has never been taught to ask a question in her life, and that's mine too. That's mine as well." The fiddler in the corner set his fiddle down on a chair. Nathaniel Ashford stepped out of the crowd, and he had his hat in his hand, and Eleanor thought of course he does. "Sir," he said to William, "I withdraw." "Nathaniel, I withdraw," he repeated. "And Miss Charlotte, I ask your pardon in front of these people because I have used you, and I have been used, and you deserved better from me than what I've done this summer." He turned to Eleanor. "Miss Hayes, what do you need from me?" "Ride to Fort Union tonight," Eleanor said. "Wake the deputy. There's a man named Creel drives for Halloran, and by morning he'll be halfway to Miles City, and he's the only one who can say who paid him for a tin of coal oil. Consider it done." He put his hat on. "And ma'am, for what it's worth this summer." "It isn't worth anything," Eleanor said not unkindly. "Ride." He rode. Her father came off the bottom step then and crossed the hall to her, and the room parted for him, and he stopped an arm's length away, with his hands out and his face wrecked. Ellie, listen. I'll fix it. I'll sign anything you want tonight right now in front of all of them. I'll give you the whole of it. The house, the herd, the north sections. Everything. It's yours. Just what? Just come home." He was shaking. "I need you. Do you hear me? Nobody's balanced a book in this house since June. The hay went to 60. There's a mare gone lame that ain't been seen to. I need you, Eleanor." And there it was, the only sentence he had ever known how to say to her, held out one last time, like a coin he was sure would still buy something. Eleanor Hayes looked at her father for a long moment. "That's the trouble," she said. "That's been the trouble for 10 years, and it took me a burned granary and a forged signature to put a name to it. So I'm going to say it out loud in this room where you said the other thing in June." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. There were 60 people in that house, and every one of them was leaning in. "All my life you taught me that my value came from serving others," Eleanor said. "That I was worth something because the books balanced, and the fevers broke, and the hired men behaved. And I believed you. I believed you so completely that when you sent me away, my very first thought standing in this hall was that I hadn't done enough." Her father's face came apart. "Today I learned my value existed before anyone needed me," Eleanor said. "It was in a register in Fort Union 11 years before you ever put a ledger in my hands. It was in a box under my floor. It was mine when I was 13 and doing your sums, and it was mine when I was 24 and chipping ice in the dark while you announced what I was for." She took a breath. "You didn't take my land, Pa. You could have given that back tonight, and I'd have signed a receipt for it. What you took was 10 years of me believing I had to earn being your daughter, Ellie. And you can't sign that back over. There isn't a paper for it." She picked up the certified copies off the hall table and put them in her bag and closed it. "Judge, I'll swear the complaint Monday morning at 9. "On whom?" Ballard said quietly. "On Michael Halloran for taking a mortgage he knew to be false, and on whoever paid for that coal oil." She looked at Charlotte standing white and wrecked at the bottom of the stairs. "And I'll make a statement about the quitclaim myself. My sister was 22 years old and lied to by her own father in her own bedroom, and I will say that under oath in any court in this territory, and I will say it as many times as they'll let me." Charlotte started to cry. "Don't," Eleanor said. "Not yet. Monday." She went out through the front door past 60 people who did not say one word to stop her and down the steps into the yard where 40 wagons stood. And Samuel Carter was standing at the fence with her horse. She stopped dead. "You've got 1,400 bushels under a tarp. Spread and turned it in a day and a half." He tipped his hat back. "Doyle sent both his boys over without being asked. Reuben's got the wall braced. Pip rang that bell so long we had to take it off him. You rode 26 miles. 26 each way, ma'am, and I've been standing at this fence since about 6:15. Samuel Carter looked at the lit-up house behind her and then at her. "I heard the whole of it through the window." Eleanor Hayes had held herself together through a burned granary, a forged deed, a mercantile, a judge, a sister and 60 of her neighbors. She did not hold together at a fence line. She put her hand over her mouth and her shoulders went, and Samuel Carter did not touch her and did not say a word. He just took one step to the left so that he stood between her and the lighted windows of that house, and he stayed there, hat in his hands, until she was done. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "Don't. I'm not usually." "Eleanor." He handed her the reins. "Get on the horse. Let's go home." They were 4 miles down the road before Samuel said it. "He still holds my note." "I know. He was crying on his own staircase and begging you to come home, and he still holds it." He didn't sound bitter. That was the strange thing. A man'll say anything with 60 people watching. "He'll call it," Eleanor said. "You reckon?" "He won't. Halloran will." She rode a while with that. "My father's finished tonight, Mr. Carter. Every man in that house is going to be at his door Monday, asking about their own paper, and the first thing a drowning man sells is the thing he can sell fastest. Your note's worth $1,100 in cash to anybody who wants a lever on this ranch. And Halloran wants a lever. Halloran's out $4,000 on ground he can't touch," Eleanor said. "He wants 2 things now. He wants me quiet, and he wants something to show his creditors. Your herd is both." Samuel was quiet for half a mile. "How long?" "He'll have bought it before I swear the complaint Monday morning. He'd be a fool not to." "Then we got 2 days." "We've got 2 days," Eleanor agreed. Nathaniel Ashford caught them at the crossing at 3 in the morning, coming the other way with his horse blown and his coat gone somewhere. "Miss Hayes? Did you get him?" The deputy got him, 9 miles out on the Miles City Road with a stock saddle and $41 and a change of shirt, which for a man that drives freight for a living is a peculiar way to spend a Saturday night. Nathaniel got his breath. He didn't fight. He asked one question. "What question?" He asked, "Was anybody hurt?" Eleanor sat very still on her horse. "Say that again." He asked, "Was anybody hurt in the fire, ma'am?" And when the deputy said no, he sat down in the road and put his head in his hands and thanked God out loud. Nathaniel wiped his face. "I don't know what to make of a man like that." "I do," Eleanor said. "It means he was told to do a thing, and he did it, and he's been sick with it for 11 days. She gathered the reins. "Which means he'll talk. Mr. Ashford, go home and sleep. Be at the courthouse Monday at 9. "I'd sooner ride out with you." "I know you would." She looked at him, and there was nothing left in it. No anger, no want, nothing but the flat kindness you give a man you've finished needing. "But you've got 60 people at your back who watched you withdraw tonight, and half of them owe my father money, and by Monday they'll be telling each other it was his daughter's fault. You go stand in your own town and say out loud what you saw. That's worth more to me than a rider." He tipped his hat and turned his horse. They got in at dawn, and Eleanor slept 4 hours and was at the table with the ledger before noon. "What are you doing?" Samuel said from the door. "Arithmetic. It's Sunday." "It's Sunday, and you're $1,100 short, so I'd say the Lord will make an allowance." She didn't look up. "Sit down. I need you to answer questions and not argue with the answers." He sat. "How many head true count?" 206. "Market. $9 in November, $6.50 if I'm selling in a week and everybody knows I'm selling in a week. So 1,300 if we're patient, and a bit over 1,300 lost if we ain't." She wrote it. "Cash on the place. $91. And in the tin under the bed." Samuel's jaw set. 62, and Ada's ring. "The ring stays where it is," Eleanor said. "Don't ever offer it to me again in a conversation about money, Mr. Carter. I don't care how bad it gets." He looked at the table. "Yes, ma'am." "Now, what do you own that isn't cattle and isn't ground?" "Nothing." "You own water," Eleanor said. He raised his head. "You don't own it. I do. But you've got the use of it under a lease, and you've had the use of it 7 years, and I want to know what you've been doing with it." She put the pen down. "Because the Doyles run 400 head 2 miles east of here, and they haul water in barrels 11 months of the year, and the mission runs sheep, and the Kendricks have got that dry section on the north line that's been killing them since 14. And every one of those people came to a burning granary at 2 in the morning. I let 'em water," Samuel said slowly. "For how much? For nothing. It's water. For 7 years. Ma'am, you don't charge a man for water." Eleanor put both hands flat on the ledger and made herself count to 3. "Mr. Carter," she said. Do you understand that you have been paying $340 a year for the only year-round water inside 40 miles, and then giving it away to 4 ranches for free? When you say it like that, it sounds foolish. It is foolish. It's the most foolish thing in this book, and there's a milk cow in here that walked off in March. She stopped, breathed. And it's also the reason 19 people came at the bell, so I'd be obliged if you'd let me finish being angry before I say the rest. Take your time. I've finished. She picked up the pen. Here's the rest. I own that water outright, and the lease to you doesn't say one word about what you may do with it. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to Fort Union to disaffirm that lease and write a new one. And when I write the new one, I'm going to put the water in my own name, and I'm going to sell it. Samuel didn't say anything. Say what you're thinking. I'm thinking those folks pulled 1,400 bushels out of a burning building for me. They did, Eleanor said. And in 11 years, not one of them has been able to build a stock tank or plan a season or borrow $1 against their own place, because nobody can borrow against a ranch that depends on a neighbor's good nature. Old Man Doyle is 68 years old, and he hauls water in barrels because he'd rather do that than have a written arrangement with a man who might die. She turned the ledger around. $20 a year per ranch per 100 head in a signed lease recorded at Fort Union 10-year term, and it passes to their children. That's $180 a year to me from 4 ranches which I don't need. And it's a piece of paper a bank will look at, which they need worse than they need the money in their pocket. And where's $1,100 in that? They pay the first 6 years in advance, Eleanor said. Samuel Carter sat back in his chair. They'll never do it. Then we'll be no worse off than we are at noon on a Sunday, Eleanor said. Saddle the horses. They went to the Doyles first, because if Doyle said no, there was no use going anywhere else. The old man listened to the whole of it standing in his own kitchen with his hat still on. Then he said, Read me the part about the children again. It passes to your heirs. It's recorded. If I die tomorrow, it stands. If my heirs sell the sweetgrass, it stands against the new owner because it's on the land and not on me. And you want $120 off me today. I want $120 off you today, and I'll tell you plain what it's for because you'd find out inside a week anyway, and I won't have you hearing it in town. Eleanor set the paper down. Michael Halloran is going to buy Mr. Carter's cattle note tomorrow and call it, and if we can't pay it in 10 days, he takes 206 head, and then he takes this place, and then he's my neighbor and yours. Doyle looked at his wife. Mrs. Doyle said, Get the box, Henry. Mother, get the box. She was already going to the cupboard herself. That man charged me 31 cents a pound for coffee in a year. My sister died and looked at me over the counter like I was a beggar for asking the price twice. She banged the tin down on the table. There's 140 in there. Take the whole of it. I want a paper, Miss Hayes. I have wanted a paper for 11 years. They had $640 by dark. The mission gave 90 and an apology. The Kendricks gave 200 and a great deal of argument first, and it was Kendrick's wife who ended it by saying, Ned, we have hauled water for 6 years, and you have complained about it for 6 years, and a woman has just offered to sell you a cure and you're haggling. The Sanchez family gave 110, which Eleanor learned later was everything, and she nearly gave it back, and Reuben stood in the doorway and said, Miss, do not insult my mother. And she took it and wrote the receipt with a steady hand and cried about it afterward in the wagon where nobody could see. 640. They were 460 short. There's the 91, Samuel said, and the 62. That's 793, and I can sell 40 head at 650. You will not sell 40 head at 650 in a buyer's market to a man who knows why you're selling, Eleanor said. That's exactly what he's counting on. The whole point of a demand note is to make you sell cheap and call it your own decision. Then what? She was quiet a long moment. Then I'm owed $1,020 by William Hayes, she said. And Monday morning, I'm going to stand in front of Judge Ballard and get a judgment for it, and I'm going to hand that judgment straight to you. Eleanor, it's your money. He collected it from you with no right. Every dollar of it came out of your pocket. She kept her eyes on the road. And you're going to take it to Halloran and pay him off with it, and Halloran is going to have to stand there and take my father's money out of my hand. That ain't why you're doing it. No, Eleanor said. But it's a considerable part of why I'm enjoying it. The courthouse at Fort Union held about 90 people, and there were 140 in it by 9 on Monday morning. Halloran had a lawyer down from Miles City in a gray coat. William Hayes came in at 4 minutes past 9 and sat at the back with his hat on his knees and did not look at anybody, and there was a space of 3 feet all around him that nobody filled. Charlotte came in behind him and did not sit with him. She sat directly behind Eleanor. Judge Ballard put his spectacles on. We'll take these in order, and we'll take 'em quick because I'm 71 and I'd like to eat lunch. Miss Hayes, you're sworn. I am. Then state your first. Disaffirmance of the lease of the Sweetgrass section executed by William Hayes as guardian in 1811 on the ground that I attained majority in March of 1823 and never ratified it. Any objection? The gray coat stood up. Your Honor, the mortgagee has an interest. The mortgagee has an interest in ground. His mortgagor never owned, Ballard said. And we'll get to you, sir, and you're not going to like it. Sit down. Disaffirmance granted. The lease is void as of this morning. Miss Hayes, you're aware that voids Mr. Carter's tenancy on the instant. I am. I've a new lease drawn. 12 years, $30 a year in my own name, and I'd like it recorded before I leave this building. $30, somebody in the back said out loud. He was paying $340. He was paying $340 a year to a man who didn't own it, Ballard said. Yes, we've all done the arithmetic. Next. Judgment against William Hayes for $1,020, being 3 years of rent collected after my majority. Mr. Hayes. The judge looked over his spectacles. You want to contest that? William stood up. He had to try twice. No, sir. You admit the sum. I do. You able to pay it? No, sir. Didn't think so, Ballard wrote. Judgment for the amount execution against the Hayes home section. And I'll tell you now, Bill, that section's coming out of your hands one way or another before Christmas. Next. And that was when the gray coat played his card. Your Honor, before this goes further, my client wishes it entered that on Saturday evening he purchased from Mr. William Hayes a promissory note in the sum of $1,100 payable on demand secured on the cattle of Samuel Carter. He held it up. Demand was made this morning at 8 o'clock. 10 days. The room made a sound. Eleanor did not turn around and did not look at Samuel and did not so much as move her hands. Noted, Judge Ballard said dryly. Mr. Carter, you got 10 days. Yes, sir. Anything to say about it? Not today, sir. Good man. Ballard turned a page. Now, the forgery. The room went dead quiet. Miss Hayes, you swore a complaint this morning against Michael Halloran on the mortgage. You did not swear one on the quitclaim. No, sir. Why not? Because I'd like the court to hear from a witness first, Eleanor said, and then I'll swear whatever the court thinks is right. Call her. Charlotte Hayes stood up before her name was out of his mouth. Eleanor turned. Charlotte. No. Her sister's face was chalk white, and her voice was thin as paper, but she went past her to the front of the room and put her hand on the book and said, I'll swear. State your name. Charlotte Ann Hayes. I'm 22. She swallowed. I wrote my sister's name on that paper. The noise in that courthouse went up like a covey of birds, and Ballard cracked the desk twice with his knuckles until it stopped. You understand what you've just said, young woman? Yes, sir. You understand nobody made you say it, and there was not one soul in this territory could prove it, but your own kin, and your own kin was sitting right there not saying it. Yes, sir. Then say the whole of it, and don't leave out the ugly parts, because the ugly parts are the only ones that'll do you any good. And Charlotte told it. The paper in her bedroom in July. The letter that did not exist. Her father crying in the doorway. 4 attempts, and 3 burned in the grate, and a page torn out of the ledger for her to copy from, and a man's voice saying slower, it don't look like her. Did you know it was a crime? No, sir. Did you ask? Charlotte's chin came up. No, sir, I didn't. Her voice cracked clean through. And I've thought about it every hour since Saturday, and I want to say this part out loud because it's the true part. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know. I've had things handed to me my whole life, and every single time I've been careful not to ask where they come from, because as long as I don't ask, it isn't mine." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "Well, it's mine. I'm not going to sit behind my sister while she says it for me." Judge Ballard took his spectacles off. He looked at that girl for a good 10 seconds. "Sit down," he said, not unkindly. "Miss Eleanor Hayes, you want to swear a complaint on that forgery?" Eleanor stood. "Against my father," she said. "Yes, not against my sister." "Explain yourself. And do it careful, because there's 140 people here, and half of them are going to repeat it wrong. Then I'll say it slow." Eleanor turned so the room could hear her. "The law says the one who holds the pen is guilty. I understand that. But there's a difference between a hand and a will, and there is not one person in this building who doesn't know it. My father is 55 years old. He has bought and sold land for 30 years. He knew exactly what that paper was, and he knew exactly what it would cost whoever signed it, and he took it upstairs to a girl of 22 who has been taught since she could walk to do as she's told and be pretty about it, and he cried at her until she did. She let it sit. He didn't just steal from me," Eleanor said. "He'd have let her go to a territorial prison for it. He'd have stood at the door and waved. So no, sir, I won't swear on her. If the court wants a felon in this matter, the court can have the man who wanted it done." "Mr. Hayes," Ballard said, "stand up." William stood. "You heard your daughter." "I heard her." "You got anything to say for yourself that ain't been said already?" And William Hayes, who had talked his way out of 100 rooms, opened his mouth and said, "She's right. I'd have let her hang for it. I've known that since Saturday, and I ain't slept." Charlotte made a small sound and put her hand over her mouth. "Well?" Ballard put his spectacles back on. "That's the first honest sentence I've heard out of you in 30 years, and I'm sorry it took a courthouse. Bound over. Bail's $400, which you don't have, so you'll sit in the back room till Thursday, and I'd advise you to use the quiet." "Judge." "Sit down, Bill." "Judge, I'll take her place." "You are not being offered a place," Ballard said, and his voice came up for the first time all morning. "This ain't a trade. You don't get to be noble at the end of it in front of your neighbors. You get to be charged, and you get to be tried, and you get to be exactly as guilty as you are. Now sit." William Hayes sat down. "Now." Ballard turned. "Mr. Halloran, your turn." The gray coat stood. "Your Honor, my client took a mortgage in good faith. Your client took a mortgage on 9,000 acres and never once walked across the street to this register to see who owned them." Ballard pointed. "That's 50 steps, sir. I've paced it. A boy could do it in 40 seconds. There is no requirement in law. There's a requirement in law that a man who takes security has got to have a colorable belief in the title, and I'm going to find he didn't, and you may appeal me to the territorial bench in Miles City, and I hope you enjoy the ride." He turned a page. "Mortgage void. $4,000 lost. And now we come to the part I've been looking forward to. Bring in Creel." They brought him in with a deputy on either side, and he was a thin man of about 40, with a bad shave, and he would not look at the crowd. "You're sworn." "Yes, sir." "Did you set fire to the granary at the Carter place on the 9th of August?" "Yes, sir." The gray coat was on his feet. "Your Honor, this man is charged separately. He's pleading, and I'm taking it, and you may sit down before I have you removed." Ballard leaned forward. "Mr. Creel, who told you to do it?" Creel looked at the floor for a long, long moment. "Mr. Halloran, sir." Halloran came half out of his chair. "You lying." "Sit down." Ballard didn't even look at him. "Go on, Creel." "He come to me on the 29th of July, sir, the day after his paper went bad. He'd had a letter from the judge's office." "He'd had a letter from me," Ballard said. "Go on." "He said the Hayes place was going under, and the Carter place was going under with it, and he said if the Carter place failed quick, before anybody looked too hard at titles, then the note holder would take it, and he'd have something to show for his 4,000. Creel's hands were working. "He give me a tin off the Hayes account on purpose. He said it that way. He said draw it on Hayes. Because he wanted it to look like Mr. Hayes done it." The courthouse erupted, and it took Ballard a full half-minute to put it down. Quiet, quiet. Krill, one more question, and then you may sit and think about the next 20 years. What was you told to burn? Creel's face went a color Eleanor had never seen on a living man. Sir, I ain't going to say it in front of the lady. You'll say it. He said the house, Creel said. Everything in that room stopped. He said the house would do it quicker than a barn, Creel said, and he was crying now, ugly and openly. And I rode out there on the 8th, and I laid up on the ridge, and I watched, and there was a boy on the porch with his arm in a sling, and there was a woman come out at 10 o'clock at night with a lamp to look at a horse's leg. And I laid up there all that next day, and I couldn't do it. So I burned the granary instead, because I figured a ranch without feed is a ranch that fails anyway. And I told myself it was the same thing, and it ain't the same thing, and I have not had 1 hour's sleep since. He put his head down on the rail and sobbed. Nobody in that room made a sound. Eleanor Hayes sat absolutely still with her hands in her lap, and Samuel Carter beside her put his hat down very slowly on the bench and looked straight ahead, and she could see the whole side of his jaw shaking. Judge Ballard took his spectacles off and rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger for a long moment. Michael Halloran, he said at last. Stand up. Halloran stood. Attempted murder is a hanging matter in this territory, and I would dearly love to send you to a jury on it, and I may yet. Deputy, take him. He raised his voice over the noise. And take the note off him. The gray coat shot up. Your Honor, the note is a lawful asset. The note is a lawful asset, Ballard agreed. And it stays lawful, and I ain't going to void a debt just because I despise the man holding it, because that's the day this court stops being worth anything. Mr. Carter still owes $1,100. He banged his knuckles. But it goes to the receiver, not to him, and there'll be no demand collected by a man sitting in my jail on a felony. Mr. Carter, you've got your 10 days from today, and you'll pay it into this court. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. And Mr. Carter, I'd hate to hear you sold cattle cheap this week. No, sir, I don't believe I will. They paid it on Thursday morning. Eleanor counted it onto the clerk's counter herself in coin and paper, and it took 4 minutes, and there were about 30 people in the hall who had found a reason to be in the hall. 640 from 4 ranches who had hauled water in barrels for 11 years. 91 out of the ranch box, and 62 out of a tin under a bed. And $307 against a judgment for $1,020 against William Hayes, which the receiver took at a discount because the receiver did not expect to see the rest of it ever. 1,100 even, the clerk said. Note satisfied. Mr. Carter, you'll want this. Samuel took the paper. He looked at it a while. Then he folded it into quarters and put it in his shirt pocket, and he said to nobody in particular, 4 years, I've woke up in the night about this. Well, Eleanor said, go back to sleep. He laughed, and then he stopped laughing, and he turned his hat around in his hands. Ma'am, I got to say a thing, and I've been putting it off since Monday. Then say it here where I can't cry about it. I'd like you to take the ranch. Eleanor put down the pen. Say that again. The improvements is yours anyhow. The barn, the corrals, the well, the house, it's all on your ground, and the old lease is dead, and the new one's a courtesy, and both of us know it. He said it fast, the way a man says a thing he's rehearsed. I got 206 head and a saddle and a limp. I'd stay on as foreman if you'd have me, and I'd work for wages, and there wouldn't be a soul in this territory could ever say you married your own land back off a man. Mr. Carter, I ain't finished. You are actually, Eleanor said, because I want you to hear yourself. You've just offered to hand me a place you've bled on for 7 years so that nobody in Fort Union will be able to gossip about me. He opened his mouth. And I'm going to tell you exactly what that is, she said. That's the same sentence my father said in June, different coat. He said the eldest must sacrifice. You're saying the man must give it away, so she's not talked about. And both of you are deciding what a woman needs without asking her. Samuel Carter stood there in the courthouse hall and went red to the ears. That's fair, he said. It ain't fair, it's just true. She picked the pen back up. The lease stands, 12 years $30, and you'll pay it on the 1st of March like a man of business. And when it comes up in 1832, We'll both be older, and we'll argue about it then. And if folks talk, Mr. Carter, I have been talked about in a parlor by 19 people, in a mercantile by 4, and in a courthouse by 140. Eleanor signed her name, one line, the M running clean into the H. I'd say I'm about the least talkable about woman left in this territory. There's nothing they can say now I haven't already said louder. They went to see her father on the way out, because Ballard sent word that he'd asked. He'd been in this back room 4 days. He looked 70. Ellie. Sir? They tell me you paid Carter's note. We paid it. With my judgment. With $307 of your judgment, and $640 from 4 ranches and $153 from a box under a bed. Eleanor stayed by the door. You'll want to know that the Doyles put in $140. Mrs. Doyle emptied the tin on the table without being asked twice. William Hayes put his face in his hands. I've been sitting here trying to work out where it started, he said. I keep going back before your mother, before the land. I think it started the first year the cattle come in short, and I told a man at the bank a figure that wasn't true, and he believed it, and nothing bad happened. He looked up. Nothing bad happened, Ellie. That's the whole of it. I told a lie, and the world just kept turning, and I thought, well, then it must be all right. And I have been telling 'em for 30 years, and the world kept turning until Saturday. It didn't keep turning, Eleanor said. You just weren't the one it fell on. He nodded slowly. Will you come Thursday when they read it out? No. Ellie, I'll come to the trial because I'll be sworn, and I'll tell the truth, and I won't decorate it. She kept her voice even. But you don't get me in the room for comfort, Pa. That's the thing you're asking for, and I want you to know that I know it. You want somebody to sit where everybody can see her sitting, so it looks like it can't be so bad if his girl's there. That's the same job you gave me in June. It's the same job you've given me since I was 14. I know what I done. I believe you do, today. She put her hand on the door. There's one thing I'll give you, and then I'll go. You asked me to come home Saturday, and you said you needed me, and I've thought about it a good deal since. She looked at him. I don't hate you. I don't want you ruined. If you'd come to me in July, if you'd walked up those stairs and said, Ellie, I've done a terrible thing with your land, and I'm frightened, I'd have fixed it. I'd have sat down at that desk, and I'd have found a way, because that is what I do, and God help me, I'd have done it gladly. Her father was crying. That's what I can't get past, Eleanor said. It wasn't the money. You had a daughter who'd have moved heaven for you, and you never once thought to ask her. You only ever thought about how to get around her. She opened the door. Charlotte's outside, she said. She's been out there an hour trying to decide whether to come in. If she does, and I don't know that she will, you'll thank her, and you won't cry at her, and you won't ask her for one single thing. Not one, Pa. She's 22, and you've already spent her. Charlotte came out to the ranch 11 days later with a trunk. She stood in the yard holding it like she wasn't sure she'd be allowed to put it down. I'm not asking to stay. You're standing in a yard with a trunk, Eleanor said. I know how it looks. Charlotte's mouth was trembling. I know that a girl who's never worked a day turning up at her sister's door with a trunk is Ellie. I know what it is. I'll go into town. I'll take a position. I don't care what Mrs. Pettigrew said she'd have me for board, and I'd rather die, but I'll do it. Can you cipher? What? Can you cipher? Add a column. Keep a tally. Pa, never. Charlotte stopped. No, not properly. Then you'll learn it, Eleanor said, and you'll learn it from me, and I'm a very hard teacher because I taught myself at 14 by candle. You'll be up at 5 with the rest of us. You'll do the mission accounts and the water leases, and you'll do them right, because there's 4 families depending on those papers, and if you put a figure down wrong, somebody hauls water for a year. Charlotte put the trunk down. You'd let me touch the books. I'd let you work, Eleanor said. That's not the same as being forgiven, Charlotte, and I want you clear-eyed about it. It's going to take a long while. There'll be days I can't look at you. You'll have to carry that without making me manage it. I can carry it. We'll see. Eleanor picked up one end of the trunk. Take the other end. There's a room at the back, and the roof leaks over the west corner, so put the bed on the other side. They got it as far as the porch before. Charlotte said in a small voice. Ellie? Why? Eleanor set the trunk down and thought about it honestly, because the girl had earned an honest answer in a courthouse. Because you stood up, she said. In front of 140 people who'd have let you sit down. Nobody ever taught you how to do that, so you had to invent it on the spot at 22 years old with a judge looking at you. She picked up her end again. That's the first thing you ever did that was yours. I'm not going to be the one that tells you it didn't count. The school started in October, and it started by accident the way most things do. The boy. Amos came out with the Doyles to move cattle, and Eleanor found him sitting on the well curb with the water lease copy in his lap, moving his finger under the words. Can you read that? Some. I can read water. He said it defiantly. And Doyle and I can read my own name because you had me sign the paper about the tin. How old are you? 11, ma'am. How many children within 10 miles of here can't read a lease? He counted on his fingers a while. All of them. So it was a corner of the granary they rebuilt, because it was the only building with a floor and no other use in winter, and it was 14 children the first week and 23 by December. Charlotte taught the letters because she'd had 4 years in St. Louis on money. Eleanor had found by cutting the hay contract, and Eleanor taught the numbers, and Old Man Doyle drove the far children in on Tuesdays and Fridays in a wagon and pretended it was on his way. You know what they're calling it in town? Samuel said one evening. I don't want to know. The Hayes School. Then they can call it the Sweetgrass School, Eleanor said, because I'm not putting that name on a building full of children. Eleanor. He turned his hat around. I got to say something, and you're not going to like the shape of it. You always say that, and then you say something true, so go on. When I found out about the deed in August, Samuel said, I want you to know exactly what I thought. I want to have said it out loud once, so it's between us and not sitting in me. Eleanor put the pen down. Say it. I thought she owns the roof over my head, and I have got nothing on this earth to offer a woman like that, and the honest thing to do is get out of her way before I cost her something. He wasn't looking at her. And I have thought it every week since, and I thought it hardest the day you counted $1,100 onto that counter in front of 30 people. And I'd have gone too. I had it worked out. Foreman's wages and a room in town, and I'd have called it decency. What stopped you? You did, in that courthouse hall. He finally looked up. You said I was doing the same thing your daddy done, deciding for you and calling it kindness. And I went home, and I sat up till 2 in the morning, and I could not find one single thing wrong with it. Eleanor's hands were very still on the ledger. So I ain't going anywhere, Samuel Carter said. I'll pay my $30 on the 1st of March, and I'll take my orders on the water like any other man. And when I've got something to say to you, I'll say it standing up in my own boots and not from behind a piece of paper. That's all. That's the whole speech. I've been carrying it 3 weeks, and it come out worse than I had it. No, Eleanor said. Her voice wasn't quite level. No, it come out fine. You're crying. I'm tired. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand and picked the pen back up. Sit down, Mr. Carter. There's a column here that doesn't balance, and I've been at it an hour, and I'd take it as a kindness if you'd ask me about it. He sat down across the table. All right, Samuel said. Tell me about the column. It's $4,000, Eleanor said. That's a big column. It's not in this book. That's the trouble. She turned the ledger around anyway. On the 2nd of April, my father borrowed $4,000 from Halloran against ground he didn't own. In August, I found the mortgage, and I was so busy being angry about the borrowing that I never once asked the only question that matters. Which is, where did it go? Samuel sat back. He bought my note. That's $1,100. That's $1,100. There's $2,900 adrift. Mr. Carter and I have been through every account in that house in my head for 2 months, and there's no place for it to hide. She tapped the page. He didn't pay his hands with it. He didn't buy stock. He went to 60 a ton on hay in August, which means in August, he was broke 4 months after coming into $4,000 in cash. Gambling. He's never played a hand in his life. He's too frightened of losing. Then he give it to somebody. Yes, Eleanor said. That's what I think too. She wrote the letter that night and gave it to the Miles City freighter in the morning, and it was 4 lines long, and it went to Nathaniel Ashford. Sir, in April, my father received $4,000. 1,100 is accounted for. Look in your own books for the rest. Do not write me a kind letter. Write me a figure. E. M. Hayes. The snow came before the answer did. It came on the 19th of November, 3 days early by every man's reckoning, and it came with a wind that dropped the country to nothing in about 2 hours. Samuel got in from the west section at dusk with ice in his eyebrows and said one word, cattle, and Eleanor was already pulling her coat off the peg. How many out? 60, maybe 70. They'll drift with it. They'll pile on the north fence and smother. Then cut the fence. He stopped with his hand on the door. Cut it, Eleanor said. 400 yards of wire is $11. 70 head is $630. Cut the fence and let them drift onto the Doyle flat, and we'll go get them Thursday. That's Doyle's grass. Doyle's got a water paper with my name on it, she said. He'll take the trade. They cut it at 9 that night, 4 of them with fence pliers and lanterns, and Pip held the horses with his one good arm and cried from the cold and did not once say he wanted to go in. They lost 9 head. By every count in that country, they should have lost 60. And on Thursday morning, Old Man Doyle came up the road with 2 of his boys and 11 of Samuel's cattle and a wagon with 4 tons of hay in it. I never asked for hay, Samuel said. I never asked for water, Doyle said. Get it off before it snows again, you contrary son of a gun. Eleanor stood on the porch and watched them pitch it down and understood with a kind of quiet shock that the ledger had changed shape on her without her noticing. She had written those water leases in August as a weapon. $20 a year, 10-year term, recorded a thing to put in front of a bank. She had sold 4 families a piece of paper because she needed $1,100 in 10 days. And what she had actually built without meaning to was a country where a man brought hay in a blizzard because a paper said the 2 of you were in something together. Miss Eleanor, Reuben at her elbow holding out an envelope. Freighter, come with the hay. It was Nathaniel Ashford's hand. She read it standing in the cold with her fingers going numb, and then she went inside and sat down on the bench inside the door and read it again. Miss Hayes. You asked for a figure, so I will give you the figure and nothing else as instructed, and then I will give you 2 sentences more because I cannot help myself. $2,400 was paid into my account at Fort Union on the 11th of April by William Hayes. It is entered in my own book in my own hand as option on the west boundary Sweetgrass line. I wrote that entry myself. I did not think about it for 1 minute. A man came to me in April and said he wished to buy a right of first refusal on a boundary he expected to have an interest in and paid cash, and I was 29 years old and pleased with myself, and I put it in the book and went to dinner. There was no option. There is no paper. I have looked 3 times. Miss Hayes, that money was a dowry. He paid it to me in April so that I could not decently withdraw from your sister in the autumn, and he dressed it as land because he knew I would not have taken it any other way, and he mortgaged your ground to do it. He bought me. And I have been the sort of man who could be bought without ever once being asked. I am riding out Saturday. You may refuse to see me, and you would be right. He came Saturday, and she saw him in the yard and did not ask him in. Miss Hayes. Mr. Ashford. I've brought it. He had a satchel. 2,400 in coin and Miles City paper. I sold 40 head to do it, and I'd have sold 400. Put it back on your horse. He stared at her. Ma'am, I don't want it, and I won't have it, Eleanor said. Do you know what that money would be in my hand? It'd be the price of my sister. I'd have to look at it every day and know what it was bought for and what it was made out of. She folded her arms against the cold. You take that to the receiver at Fort Union, and you pay it in against my father's judgment, and you tell the clerk out loud what it was, and you make him write it in the record. That money goes to his creditors. Yes. Miss Hayes, some of that comes back around to you. You're a creditor. You've got 1,020 against him. Then I'll take my share the same as the butcher and the blacksmith and Doc Merriman, who's been owed $9 since March, Eleanor said. Not 1 penny more. I'm not going to be the one person in this territory who profits off what my father did, sir, Because if I am, then in 10 years, the story in town won't be about him. It'll be about the daughter who came out of it rich." Nathaniel Ashford stood in that yard a long moment. "You've thought about this a good deal." "I think about everything a good deal. It's my whole difficulty." She unfolded her arms. "Now, there's a thing you want to ask me, and you've had it in your mouth since you got down off that horse, so ask it and then go. Is she here?" "She is." "Would she see me?" "That's not my business," Eleanor said. "And it took me a while to learn that, so you can thank me for it later." "Charlotte." Charlotte came out onto the porch with ink on her fingers and a shawl over her shoulders and stopped dead when she saw who it was. "Oh." "I'll be inside," Eleanor said, and went and did not look back and stood behind the door like any human being would. She heard him say it. She heard him say a great deal of it, that he had been a coward in June and a coward in August, that he had let a man pay him for a marriage and never troubled to look at the entry, that he did not expect anything and had no right to, and had come to say it to her face because saying it in a letter would have been one more easy thing. And she heard her sister say, "Nathaniel, stop." "Charlotte, no, I mean it, stop, because you're about to say the next part and I don't want to hear it." "You don't know what the next part is." "You're going to ask if there's any way back," Charlotte said. "And I'm going to say no, and then you're going to feel worse, and then I'm going to feel sorry for you, and then I'll be doing the thing I've done my whole entire life, which is manage a man's feelings about his own behavior." There was a silence out there that Eleanor could have leaned on. "That's fair," Nathaniel said. "It ain't fair, it's just true." A pause. "That's Ellie's. I've took to saying it. It's very useful." "Charlotte, I want you to know I did care for you. I know you did. That's the sad part." Her voice was perfectly steady, which Eleanor had never once heard out of her. "You cared for me the way you'd care for a good horse you were pleased to have got. And I let you, because being cared for like that was the only trade I'd ever been taught. So we're square, Nathaniel. I'm not angry. I'm 3 months into learning how to add a column of figures, and I am not going to stop halfway through to be somebody's second choice made good. Is there anything I can do?" "Pay the money in," Charlotte said. "And in the spring, when they try my father, you stand up in that courthouse and you say out loud what that entry was in your book. In front of everybody. Because there's going to be 60 people in there telling each other that girls like me get what we deserve, and I'd like one man in that room to say what was actually done." "I'll do that." "Then that's all. Go on, it's cold." Eleanor got herself away from the door and back to the table before her sister came in, and she was writing when Charlotte stopped beside her chair. "You listened." "Every word." "Ellie." "I'd have listened if you'd nailed the door shut," Eleanor said. "Sit down and do the mission column. You've got Reuben's $90 in the wrong month." Charlotte sat down. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the table until they stopped, which was a thing she had learned from watching her sister and did not know she'd learned. "Was it right? What I said?" "It don't matter if it was right. It matters to me." "Then yes," Eleanor said. "It was right and it was your own, and I'd have been proud of it at 30, and you did it at 22. She dipped the pen. "Now fix the mission column before I have to look at it again." The trial came on the 14th of April. It ran 3 days, and Eleanor sat through the whole of it in the second row with her hands in her lap. Michael Halloran fought it every hour of it, and his gray coat from Miles City fought it, and it did him no good at all, because Creel had told it plain, and Creel never wavered once. Not on the second day, when the gray coat had him for 2 hours. Not when they put it to him that he was a liar, buying his own neck. He said the same words on Wednesday that he had said in August. He said the House. He said the House would do it quicker. They convicted Halloran on Thursday morning. 12 years. He turned around when they took him out and found Eleanor in the room and looked at her, and she looked back, and she did not give him one thing. Judge Ballard took Creel next. "Mr. Creel, you've pled and I've took it, and there's nothing before me now but the number of years. Anybody wish to be heard?" Eleanor stood up. The room turned. Samuel put his hand on the bench beside her, not on her just there. "Miss Hayes." "I'd like to say 2 things, and then I'll sit." "Say 'em." This man rode out to our place on the 8th of August and laid on the ridge with a tin of coal oil and orders to burn the house with us inside it, Eleanor said. There was a boy of 13 on the porch with a broke arm. I came out at 10 at night with a lamp. He had all of us, sir, twice over, and he lay up there a day and a night and could not do it. He burned your feed. He burned my feed and he'll answer for it, and I want him to answer for it. I'm not asking you to let him go. She kept her voice level. I'm asking the court to remember that the only man in this whole business who was ever told to do a wicked thing and stopped. The only one is the one standing in front of you with nothing to his name. Every other man in it did as he was told and took the money. My father did. Mr. Ashford did. I'd have done it myself at 14 if somebody'd asked me right, and that's the second thing I came to say. Ballard looked at her over his spectacles a long moment. Sit down, young woman. He turned. Creel. 4 years. And you can thank her, and I'd advise you to do it in a letter and not out loud, because I don't want this courtroom to think I've gone soft in my old age. Creel put his head down on the rail again. He did not say anything at all. They took William Hayes on the third day. He pulled guilty at 9 o'clock in the morning to the whole of it, the forgery, the mortgage, the 3 years of rent, and he would not let his lawyer say one word in mitigation, and when Ballard asked him whether anybody wished to speak for him, nobody in that room stood up. Nobody. 60 people had eaten at his table. 19 had stood in his front room in June and watched him give his eldest daughter away like a mule with a good back. Not one of them got out of their seat. Eleanor sat there with her heart going like a hammer and understood with a clarity that made her sick that she could stand up right now and change the sentence. Everyone in that room knew it. Ballard knew it. She could feel her father not looking at her. She did not stand up. Anything to say? Ballard asked. No, sir. Nothing at all. I had a thing I was going to say, William Hayes said. I wrote it out in the back room. It was about my wife and about the drought and about how a man gets in a corner. He stopped. It was another one, Judge. That's all it was. I've been telling 'em 30 years, and I can smell one now before it's out of my mouth. So I'll not say it. I done every bit of it, and I knew I was doing it, and I'd have let my youngest go to prison for me. That's all there is. Ballard was quiet. 7 years, he said. And Bill, I'll tell you what I told you in July, and it'll be the last time. She might have forgiven you for taking it. I know what she'd have forgiven, William said. I knew in July. That's the part I can't carry. They let her see him afterward for a quarter of an hour. You didn't stand up, he said. No, I want you to know I never expected you to. He was turning his hat in his hands, and she thought with a pain she hadn't braced for, that's where Charlotte gets it. I sat there and I hoped, but I never expected it. There's a difference, and I want you to hear that I know the difference now. Pa. Ellie, I'm going to ask you for one thing, and it's the last thing I'll ever ask you for, and then I'm done asking. Eleanor's whole body went tight. Go on. Don't come, her father said. She stared at him. Don't come out there. Not at Christmas, not on my birthday, not when somebody writes you that I'm sick. He wouldn't look up. Because if you come once, I'll spend the whole 7 years working out how to make you come twice. That's what I am. I've had 4 months in a back room to look at it, and that's what I am, and the only clean thing I've got left is knowing it. You're asking me to stay away. I'm asking you to let me not use you, William Hayes said. It's the only thing I've ever thought of to give you, and it ain't much of a gift. Eleanor Hayes stood in that room and cried for the first time in front of her father since she was 11 years old. Charlotte'll come, she said finally. I won't stop her, and I won't send her. That's right. That's how it ought to be. And Pa? She got hold of herself. The house. They're selling the home section in June on the judgment. I know it. Do you want to say anything about that? Her father looked up at last, and there was something almost like a smile on him. No, he said. It ain't mine. It never was. It come out of your mother, and it went through my hands, and I lost it. That's the whole story of me in one line, and you can put it on the stone. They sold the Hayes home section on the 11th of June on the courthouse steps at 11 in the morning. There were about 90 people there, and there was no earthly reason for 85 of them to be there, except the one reason. "They've come to watch you buy it," Samuel said. "I know. The whole county's got it worked out. Doyle's got money on it. Mrs. Pettigrew's been telling folks for 2 weeks it's the finest thing she ever heard of a girl buying her daddy's house off the courthouse steps." He turned his hat. "Eleanor, what are you going to do? What do you think I ought to do?" "I'm not going to answer that." "Why not?" "Because you told me in a hallway in October that I don't get to decide what you need and call it kindness," Samuel said. "And I have thought about that sentence about 400 times since, and I ain't going to spoil the record now." Eleanor laughed. It came out shaky. The bidding started at 900. It went to 1400 inside a minute. Mostly Kendrick, who had wanted that river frontage for 11 years and had told everyone so. Eleanor raised at 16. The crowd made a noise like a door opening. Kendrick went 17. Eleanor went 1850. A cattle buyer down from Miles City, who had never set foot in that country, went 19, and Eleanor went 2,100. And the buyer looked at her and looked at the 90 people and put his hands in his pockets. 2,100, said the auctioneer. Anybody, nobody. Sold to Miss Eleanor Hayes. And that was when 85 people started clapping, and Mrs. Pettigrew burst into tears, and somebody's hat went up in the air, and Old Man Doyle bellowed something Eleanor could not hear over the rest of it. She stood there and let it go on for about 15 seconds. Then she held up her hand, and it went quiet faster than she was ready for. "I'd like to say something, and then I'd like all of you to go home and have your dinner because you've made an occasion out of a bankruptcy sale, and that is a poor way to spend a Tuesday." Somebody laughed. Not many. "I know what this looked like just now," Eleanor said. "It looked like the end of a story where the plain daughter gets her father's house. I've watched all of you decide that's what you were coming to see. And I want to be straight with you, because I have had a year of people deciding things about me in rooms I wasn't standing in." She had the paper in her hand. "I didn't want it," she said. "I've never wanted it. I've got 9,000 acres and a school with 40 children in it, and a lease that pays me $30 a year off a man who's worth 10 of anybody who ever sat in that parlor. I bought that house for one reason, and the reason is that Ned Kendrick would have run cattle over my mother's kitchen garden by August, and I am not made of stone." She turned around and put her hand out. "Charlotte." Her sister came up the steps white as paper. "Ellie, what are you?" "There's a lease drawn on the back of it. 12 years, $30 a year payable the 1st of March, recorded at Fort Union, and it passes to your heirs." Eleanor put it in her hands. "Same terms as Mr. Carter's. Not a nickel better and not a nickel worse, and if you're late, I'll come after you for it, and I'll enjoy it." Charlotte stood on the courthouse steps and could not speak. "You've got to say something," Eleanor said. "There's 90 people. I can't run a ranch. You can add a column of figures, which is more than the last man who ran it could do." Eleanor's voice dropped so only her sister could hear it. "You'll be bad at it for 2 years. You'll come out to me crying about the hay contract in August, and I'll sit up half the night with you and be short-tempered about it. And then one day, you'll do a season on your own, and you won't tell anybody, and that'll be the day, Charlotte. That's the whole thing. There isn't any more to it than that. Why are you giving me this? I'm not giving you anything. It's a lease. You'll pay for it every year for 12 years. Eleanor stepped back. "But if you want the true reason, because Ma's letter said they'd send me away and dress it up as duty," and she was right. "And I have thought a great deal about the fact that she wrote to me, and she never wrote a word to you." She had to stop a second. "She should have. You were 11. She should have left you something too, and she didn't, and there's not one thing I can do about that except this." Charlotte Hayes sat down on the courthouse steps in front of 90 people and put her face in her hands. The school moved into the granary corner permanently that autumn, and there were 41 children in it by the second week, and Eleanor spent one whole Sunday in October arguing with the mission and the Doyles and Mrs. Pettigrew about whether the Sanchez children could sit on the same benches as the rest. She won it because she stood up in the schoolhouse and said, "Reuben Sanchez put $110 on my table in August, and it was every dollar his mother had, and I took it, and there's 4 ranches watering off that money. If his sister sits outside, then I'll take the 90 back off the mission, and we'll all haul barrels again." Nobody said another word about it. And it was Amos who ended it, really. Amos, 12 years old by then, who stood up at the water meeting in November and read the Doyle lease out loud in front of 19 grown men because Old Man Doyle's eyes had gone, and he wouldn't admit it. "He read it clean through," Doyle said afterward, wiping his face. "Every word. That boy's daddy can't write his own name." "He'll be doing your accounts in 6 years," Eleanor said. "I'll be dead in 6 years. Then he'll do your boys." She got a letter in January from a bank in Miles City addressed to E.M. Hayes Esquire, offering terms on a line of credit against the Sweetgrass water leases. And she wrote back a 2-line letter correcting the salutation and accepting the terms, and Samuel found her laughing about it at the table at 11 at night. "What's funny? They'll lend money to a woman with a piece of paper," Eleanor said, "and they'd have lent nothing to the same woman in June of last year, and I am exactly the same person. That's not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing." "You're tired." "I'm always tired. It's my natural condition." "Eleanor." He sat down across from her, which he had done every night for a year and a half. "Can I ask you something that ain't about the ranch?" "Since when do you ask permission?" "Since about March." She put the pen down. "Ask it." "Are you happy?" Eleanor Hayes sat with that question a while, and the honest thing about her was that she actually considered it instead of answering. "I don't know that I'd use that word," she said finally. "I'm not unhappy. I'll tell you what I am if you want the true answer instead of the polite one." "You know I do. I'm not afraid," she said. "I hadn't got a name for it till about Christmas. I woke up on Christmas morning, and I lay there, and I couldn't think of a single person in this world who could take a thing off me without I said so. Not one." She turned the pen over. "I was afraid every single day for 10 years in that house, and I never knew it, because being afraid all the time just feels like being careful. And then it stopped, and it was so quiet, I thought something was wrong." Samuel didn't say anything for a moment. "That's the best answer to a question I ever got in my life," he said. "It's the only one I had." The second summer came in hot and long, and the Carter place ran 900 head, and shipped in September at $9.40, and Toby, who was 62 by then, and had opinions announced in the yard that it was the best year the ranch had ever had, and that he'd been there for all of them. Eleanor paid off the Miles City line in October, 11 months early. The Sweetgrass water leases went to 7 ranches. The school had 52 children and a stove. Charlotte Hayes came out on the 1st of March with $30 in an envelope and a hay contract signed on the 9th of August, 3 days early, and stood in the yard with her chin up, waiting to be told she'd done it right. And Eleanor made her wait about 4 seconds longer than was kind. "It's a good contract." "Is it?" "It's a better contract than I got in 18. Eleanor put it in her pocket. "Don't let it go to your head. The price was soft." Charlotte laughed and cried a little at the same time, which was a thing she did, and then said, "I went to see him in April." "I know. He wrote me." "He wrote you 4 lines. He said you'd come, and that you looked well, and that he never asked you for anything, and he'd like that put on the record." Eleanor kept her voice even. "That's the 3rd letter in 2 years, and every one of them's been 4 lines, and none of them's asked me for a thing. I don't know what to do with that, Charlotte. I truly don't." "You don't have to do anything with it." "I know. That's what I can't get used to." It was the last week of September, 2 years and 3 months after a wagon turned out of a yard at 10 minutes to 5 in the morning, that Samuel Carter came in from the west section and did not take his hat off. Eleanor noticed it because he always took his hat off. "Mr. Carter, I'd like a quarter of an hour," he said, "and I'd like it outside, and I'd like you to not say anything till I've got the whole of it out, because I've been 3 weeks at this, and if you interrupt me, I'll lose the thread, and I'll have to start over, and neither of us has got the time." "That bad?" "Eleanor." She put the pen down and went out. He stood there and turned his hat around twice, and then stopped himself and held it still, which she understood was a decision he'd made in advance. 2 years and 3 months ago, I come up your daddy's road at 4:45 in the morning, and you were standing on that porch with a trunk and nobody to see you off," he said. And I have thought about that porch about every week since, because I want you to know what I saw. I didn't see a poor girl who'd been done wrong. I've seen plenty of those, and they don't stand like that. Samuel, you said you wouldn't interrupt. I said no such thing. Well, I'd hoped. He took a breath. I saw somebody who'd already decided something in the night. That's what I saw. And I have watched you decide about 400 things since, and I have not once seen you decide a small one. He put his hand in his coat pocket. Now here's the part I've got to say careful, so I'll say it slow. Last year in this yard, you told me I ain't allowed to decide what you need and call it kindness. And I have kept to that. But there's a thing I've been deciding for 2 years without telling you, and I reckon that's the same sin with a better hat on, so I'm going to lay it out and let you have it. Go on. I've been in love with you since the 9th of August, 1818, Samuel Carter said. Since about 4 in the morning when there was 19 people asleep in this yard, and you got up off a feed sack with your hands burned through and told a boy to go put the coffee on, because them people had worked all night and they'd want feeding before they rode. Eleanor did not say anything at all. I never spoke because I was a man with a lease from a woman who owned the ground I stood on, and there ain't a thing I could have said that wouldn't have sounded like I was buying something. He took the ring out. So I waited till I could say it standing in my own boots. 900 head. Notes paid. Rents paid the 1st of March 4 years running. This come out of the September money in Miles City, and I want that on the record because it ain't Ada's. Ada's goes to Pip's girl when he's got one, and Pip knows it, and that's settled. Samuel. I'm asking you to marry me, he said, and I've got no argument prepared for if you say no, so I'd take it kindly if you'd be quick. Eleanor Hayes stood in that yard with her heart going and made herself say the true thing instead of the easy one, because that was the whole of what she had built out of the last 2 years. Do not choose me because you need me. Samuel Carter went very still. Say that again. You heard it. I heard it. I want to hear it twice because I've waited 2 years to hear you say something that hard, and I don't want to have missed a word of it. Do not choose me because you need me, Eleanor said. I have been needed my entire life, Mr. Carter. I was needed at 14, and I was needed at 24, and my father stood at the bottom of his own staircase in front of 60 people and told me he needed me, and it was the ugliest thing anybody ever said to me. I have run your books, and I have saved your feed, and I have kept this place standing, and if that's what you're asking for, then you can have all of it for $30 a year, and you can sleep sound, but you cannot have me for it. I know. You don't. Eleanor. He said it gently. I ain't asking for the bookkeeper. I could hire a bookkeeper. There's a fella in Fort Union does it for $2 a week and he's got a green shade and everything. She laughed. It came out wrecked. Then why? Because I choose you. Samuel Carter said, because I finally see you. Eleanor put her hand over her mouth. I don't mean it pretty, I mean it plain, and I've had 3 weeks to get the words right, so let me have 'em. He came 1 step closer and not 2. Every soul in your daddy's house looked straight at you for 10 years and saw a pair of hands. Ashford looked at you every second Thursday for 2 years and saw a head for figures. I did it myself the first month. I thought, thank God, somebody who can add. And then that granary went up, and I watched you stand in the smoke and give 19 people orders and count children behind a well, and I saw the whole of it at once. Not the hands, not the head. Samuel, you'd have burned your own hands off for a boy of 13 and a man you'd known 6 weeks, he said. That's who you are. That was who you were on that porch at 4:45, and it was who you were at 14 years old, adding your daddy's sums by candle. And it did not require one single person on God's earth to notice it before it was true. His voice went. Your value was there before anybody needed you. You said that in a hallway to your father, and half the county heard it. I'm saying it back to you in a yard with nobody listening, because I've come to reckon that's the only place it counts. Eleanor Hayes stood there and cried openly in her own yard in the middle of the afternoon. You've got ink on your hands, Samuel said. I've always got ink on my hands. I know it. I've had 2 years of it. I'm just saying so you know I know. Yes, she said. Beg pardon. Yes, you contrary man, don't make me say it twice with my face like this. He put the ring on her finger and got it on the wrong one, and had to do it again, and neither of them ever told that part to anybody. They were married in the schoolhouse in November because there were 52 children and no other building big enough, and Judge Ballard came out from Fort Union and read it himself and complained about the drive the entire way. Charlotte stood up with her sister. Amos 13 read the marriage lines out loud from the paper because Eleanor asked him to, and because Old Man Doyle had made a great point of saying that boy could read anything. She signed her name in the book afterward. Eleanor Margaret Hayes. One line, the M running clean into the H, the way she had written it since she was 14 years old, at a desk in the dark, with a column that had to balance by morning. Samuel looked over her shoulder at it. "You're not changing it." "No," Eleanor said. "I've spent a considerable amount of money proving that's my name." And Samuel Carter laughed out loud in a schoolhouse in front of 100 people, which was a thing he had not done in the years before she came, and Toby said so to anybody who'd listen for the rest of his life.